Meadows Public Utility District on Sunday, August 31st. The time is about 8 a.m. Manager Sharp, you have some announcements.
Welcome to the Kirkland Meadows Public Utility District Special Board Meeting. This meeting is fed live over the internet, and the public can view this meeting by going to www.kmpud.com and following the appropriate link. If the public would like to make a comment or ask a question, please email msharp@kmpud.com and follow the appropriate link. This is the first time in recorded history that we do not have a telephone conference. Anyone's calling into the call, so you'll notice the absence of a polycom. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a thing. So
First time in recorded history.
What a novel idea to actually get together.
Yeah, everybody's actually here.
Great. Peter, would you please call a roll?
Sure. Rickard?
Here.
Andy?
Amazingly here.
Yes. Welcome back.
We'll ask for oral communication, but I'll jump the gun a bit and just say thanks to the board, the community, the committee members, and the staff for helping me through the difficult period there. I appreciate it so much.
Okay. O'Grady?
Here.
Norbrick here, and Epstein. Epstein here. All right, all present and accounted for.
Great. Agenda item number 4 is oral communication. This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board on non-agenda items relating to district business. No action can be taken by the board on matters not appearing on the agenda. Does anyone-
Well, maybe I'll bring up the greenhouse. I don't know who else heard about the idea. It was a Valley employee came to me and asked if I would be supportive and if I could get some support for the idea of a community greenhouse that I guess would mainly be for Valley employees. Our thought is we could try to raise the money for it through homeowners and employees. We're not asking for money, and the labor would be employees or guests who want to work on it. And we think there's support. What we need is a space to put it. And, you know, I had a couple thoughts, but I mean, one place would be the KCA, but I haven't brought that to them over where we haven't built a building. But my other thought is that really somewhere over here makes more sense because you've already got employee staff in this area. So whether it would be year-round or seasonal, but I've tried to grow vegetables in the summer several times, and really it's not enough of a growing season to get anything. So even if it was just a May to November, people could grow summer stuff. So I guess we're looking for some support and just a little space, which doesn't need very much.
Sorry.
Yes, I know we can't take action on any item. I'm just going to suggest that maybe the planning committee take it up.
Sounds reasonable.
That's fine, if we can just get it on somebody's agenda for next year.
Planning committee it is, that's me. So-
Okay, then maybe by next year we could figure it out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nancy, did you have something you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I did. Nancy Turbett, West Side homeowner. I appreciate the fact that the board agenda is published on the web. However, I would request that the board consider publishing the full agenda with all I call it annotated. So for instance, today's agenda, it skips from pages 92 to 110, and then also the financials aren't on there. So if you are someone who's sitting remotely trying to look at the agenda or have an interest in part of what's going on today, you're missing some pieces of information. Thank you.
I think you mean the board packet, don't you?
Maybe that packet, I don't know the terminology, but yeah.
Okay, and there's a
Yeah,
abbreviated version?
correct.
I don't think we need to
So
agendize that. Why don't we look into that, unless you want to respond at this point?
Well, there's certain rules that we can't publish things on the web. Things like, right off the top of my head, legal correspondence isn't allowed, and we've been briefed by our general counsel on what can and what cannot be placed on the website. So we can relook at that, but it's pretty clear on things. We don't put our receivables on the web as well. So there's certain things we just don't place on the web. But we can look at that. We might be too conservative at this point. We are very conservative on what we put on the website.
How about the version you email around? Is that the same as the full packet, or is it the one on the website?
The full pack goes to the board
Okay.
as required. We have an option of putting a version on the website, which we do, but that's a tailored version that's allowable to go onto the website. Now, packets can also be requested by individual homeowners as well, and people do that all the time. So, but the website version is not the full packet. So I would much rather have a version that we send out, you know, just like the agenda packet, and for a cost, people can get the full, the full version, just like they do it at Alpine County. They have a version that you can sign up for. I think it might be free if you do it over email, but it's cost if you have a paper version. And we get a full packet from Alpine County and TriTac and things like that. So I would welcome for the community members that individually would like to receive an email copy, but I strongly recommend that we do not publish the full agenda on the website.
When we give that to the finance committee, and we'll figure out how to get everything to people who want it, with minimizing the overhead and no paper.
Did you say finance or communications?
Well, I guess it's communications. Yeah, okay, we'll take that.
Great. Any others? So, agenda item number 5 is corrections to the agenda or consent calendar. For purposes of the Brown Act, all consent and action items listed, I'm supposed to give a brief description of each item of business to be transacted or discussed. So the consent calendar consists of 4 items today. Minutes, approval of the minutes from the August 9th, 2014 board meeting. Water stage alert revision. This is approval of resolution 1422, revising water stage alert. Consent for claims, approval of current consent for claims and receivables shutoffs. Review of current receivables shutoff report. Does anybody have any corrections to the agenda or consent calendar?
I do. Staff requests to delete item 8B1. That would be the current status PGE negotiations, and take that under 8C, which is the interconnection agreement. It just makes sense. We'll just talk about PGE all at once. Staff would like to take agenda items 8F and 8G together and not seek approval of ordinance 1405 until after the public hearing. So we'd like to discuss the net metering at the public hearing and then look for approval or direction on ordinance 1405. And staff would like to defer on item 8K, employee housing manual upgrade.
Great. On 8K, the reason for the deferral is we consider it as a personnel committee on Friday, and there are certain revisions we'd like to make, but since the full employee manual is in the board packet, if you guys have any comments or suggestions, please relay them to Michael. So moving on to agenda item number 6, adoption of the consent calendar. Entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Also move that we adopt the consent calendar.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. There are no consent items brought forward for separate discussion, so we'll move to 8A, new and unfinished business and action items. A is discussion and possible action regarding the design, timeline, bidding process, costs, and construction activities associated with the Out Valley Power Line project. And there are 3 sub-bullets: overall construction update, Out Valley operations and maintenance and transportation investigation, and project closeout. Manager Sharp, it's all yours.
The Out Valley project will come in 8 parts today. First, we'll talk about the overall construction update. Then we'll get into the Out Valley operations and maintenance, talk about the project closeout. Believe it or not, we're actually talking about the project closeout. It's pretty exciting. Talk about the overall project costs and the remaining risks. Talk about the B8 loan and the way that we're going to fund the remainder of the project. The Powerhouse depreciation study, which is, we have draft form in the packet. It's pretty exciting news. The revision of the PG&E interconnection agreement. And finally, any change orders that are before us. So I'll start with the overhead. I'm pleased to announce that as these pictures indicate, the old 12K poles have been removed. All the cutover to the surfaces have been completed. The cabin owners now have power provided on district lines. The 12 kV is up and running. So this is pretty exciting. So you can see that the line looks a lot less cluttered now without the old 12 kV. The clearance that we had earlier in the month, they were able to take out all the old poles and all the old wire and ship them down to the PG&E facility. And it's now, as it looks here, it's basically just the district's steel line. What is left is the final restoration work. A final walkthrough with the Forest Service is scheduled for next week. And the contractor will be getting the district the miscellaneous spare parts as well as the ladder sections. And you see these ladder sections here on the 115 line, they all have ladders going up. On the 34 line, they have about 1/3 of the ladders. And these ladders are removable. They kind of go like that, and you can remove them from ladder to ladder. So we'll be getting the ladders that we've purchased along with miscellaneous spare parts like insulators and different parts from the contractor. The overhead portion, originally scheduled for to be completed in late September, is basically done. And is there any questions on the overhead portion of the project?
No, I just want to again say, and I think this was, Michael and Michelle, probably others, but the fact that you navigated through the spotted owl issue and allowed us to do this, I mean, that was a huge risk to us, and you navigated through it beautifully, so thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you. Please. The underground portion is also nearing completion. Final terminations are being completed for both the electrical and the fiber. The identification markers are being installed. These markers go along the roadways and they identify where our electrical line is. And there's a certain specified distance that we put these markers in. They're actually not red, they're actually brown. And the sectionalizing cabinets will also have markers on them on either side, which has been a change from the snow pole idea that we originally had. We're actually going to be putting them on the sectionalizing cabinets. We were going to put in snow poles, but when we went to, they marked out where they wanted to put the snow poles with guineas, the little string things. And once they dug down to see exactly what was underneath them, on their best recollection, one had a fiber line underneath it and one had a volcano line underneath it. So we went to Plan B because we don't want to be the guys that go out there and destroy the system that we just installed. So I think Plan B is a really good plan. So.
Well, how are you going to see the marker on the cabinet before you hit the cabinet in the snow?
Cabinets will be, the markers will be, they're built to be on the cabinets themselves, and they go on the sides of the cabinets and they go up.
They stick up.
6-8 feet.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's what you mean. Okay.
Right, so they're actually attached to the small sides of the cabinets, the short sides. Rocks are being placed to hide the sectionalizing cabinets, and concrete collars are being installed around the vaults where snow plowing damage could occur. Final restoration is being done with a final walkthrough with the Forest Service scheduled for next week. Chip sealing has been completed on private property and on Bear River Reservoir Road. Final paving is scheduled for September. So for the overhead, we actually have the line all the way from KM Blue to Salt Springs. And it's terminated, it's in sectionalizing cabinets. What we're working on now is the restoration and the paving, the cleanup effort. So there's only one sectionalizing box that's left to be installed. We had an extra box, 36A, that I talked about last time because we had so many bends in the pipe we couldn't make the run. We were successful in bringing that up into a sectionalizing cabinet, making the runs on both sides. So what we hoped would happen happened, and so we have a functional mechanical line going all the way through. Questions on the underground? The substations, that is KM Green. Some of you, Standish came out and Peter came out and has seen this recently, but this is quite the sight. You can see the steel has been installed, and the terminations from the 34K line and the 115 are into the substation now. So it's a complete line. What they're doing now is now that all the equipment has been received and installed, the contractor is wiring it all together and bringing it up into the different components. PG&E will be doing their required work at each of the substations in September. The fence contractor will be on site next week. This is a 14-foot fence that's going to be installed around KM Green. The 115 line will go hot in mid-September. The 34 kV line will go hot later in the month. Now, going hot and going live are different things. Going hot means that it's energized. Going live would mean that we're actually providing electricity service. October is reserved for testing and commissioning with the go-live date of November 1st. Questions on the substations? I thought it would be interesting to take a look at some before and after shots. Here is what we refer to as the dirt room, and there's considerably less space in it now than there has been in the past with the addition of switchgear and a reactor. This is the outside of the dirt room, KM Blue, and you can see the excavation and then the actual installation of that transformer. This is KM Green, and I think you'll remember it back during the, you can actually see the smoke from the fires of last year, from the rim fire, Yosemite, when they were doing the building and now the construction site. And that's called a masticator, and actually that's a line that they put in, and here's our after shot. They're not exactly before and after, but you get the idea of creating the site. This concludes my Out Valley construction report, and I was looking if there's any overall questions.
One before and after comment is that in terms of the district's presentation skills, I've noted before is that easel over there, and after is the overhead. You made considerable progress, so in an effort to reduce rates, maybe we can develop an alternative source of revenue in terms of, presentation skills and teaching those to other constituents. What do you think?
I could possibly rent myself out.
In the free time?
Any questions for Michael on the?
Were you going to cover Caltrans later? I mean, one of the other items?
Yeah, this was basically a construction overall. During the risk portion, I actually will get into the areas that I see that we have risks.
Great, why don't you keep going?
There are preliminary plans for a celebration are underway with the event after the November 1st board meeting at the Wall Bar. So we'll get more into that as we get closer along, but that is pretty well being formulated.
Is that a public event?
No. There's only a certain amount of room at the Wall Bar, so. Operations and maintenance. District staff continues to go out in the field to witness terminations and perform inspections on the underground portions. marking the sexualizing cabinets, as has been discussed, installing omniballs. I think we all know what an omniball is now. GPS coordinates on all of the sexualizing cabinets, access points, where are you going to park to get there. The list goes on and on. Meeting with Wilson Construction, who we hope to use for the substation and overhead, who you're going to call contractor, and Titan Electric on the underground. And we're going to be firming up our relationships with both contractors. Cost-saving move, the district will be installing the bollards to protect equipment along the underground line and at the substations. We install these two gorgeous bollards here. This will save the district around $50,000 from the contract amount. More and more, the district is taking over the ownership of the line. This will mean frequent visits to different portions of the line, training and relationships with our new vendors. The need for reliable four-wheel drive Highway 88 vehicles is going to be a must. It's something that we continuously send our, typically in Kirkwood, and Peter will attest to this, if it was a Kirkwood vehicle, that mean it could get to the Kirkwood Inn and back, and hopefully not break down. And things are changing. So we need to get a fleet that, will actually make it on the highway. We need to have training as far as parking on the highway, coning off our area, being able to work on things, and being overly safe like Caltrans. So it's kind of a revelation for me that, I saw some of our workers along the side of the road and said, we just can't, we have to be extremely safe. We need to set an example out there. So vehicles have to be well marked, our people need to be well marked, precautions, big flagging, work on the shoulder of the road, whatever it might take. So this is something that staff is focused on. Questions on operations or maintenance? Project closeout. So placed in your information in the board package on pages 7 and 8 regarding steps needed to close out a public works project. We are in the punch list phase, so we have a ways to go, including receiving assistance, receiving as-built, formulating additional punch lists, final acceptance inspections, monitoring for stop notices, final accounting and payments, board acceptance. The board will actually have to pass a resolution accepting the project, final payment, etc. On the permit side, we need to work on completion with the Army Corps of Engineers. We have a nationwide permit. We have the Central Valley Regional Water Control Board, the SWIPS, California Department of Fish and Game, Caltrans encroachment permit, and then finally, and probably most importantly, the United States Forest Service special use permit, which will give us, that's where the land is on. So we have a lot of work to close out this project and get this into a final state, which we'll be working on over the next 6 months.
6
Questions?
months?
What's that?
6 months.
Well, yeah, we've got 2 months to close it out, and then I would say by the time that everything is done, and it's, I would say 6 months is just a guess.
Okay.
Questions on?
Questions from the board, audience?
And this topic will be coming back on a monthly basis as we go through it.
We have, is part of RCI's work to help us with that
Yeah.
currently?
Yes. Can you
Question.
identify yourself?
Yes, I'm Greg Wolfson. I'm a resident in Meadowstone, Meadowstone Lodge. I had a question about the permit closeout for synchronization with CalISO on the electrical side. Where are you with the process of getting the permits for the grid operator?
Good question. So we're meeting regularly. Brandy Fishner actually has a report today and an agreement that we'll be asking the board to look at, which is the PAL, the Participating Load Agreement. We've already have a small utility agreement with CalISO and the meter agreement, This is the last of the 3 agreements that we have with Cal ISO. Our electrical engineer is working with their technical staff as far as the meter equipment and how that communication device is going to be communicating with Cal ISO from the district. And so we're well along our ways with our relationship with Cal ISO. And we have hired Shell Energy as our schedule coordinator.
Okay, all right, so you have someone looking over that for you. Yeah.
And then we also have quite a few consultants.
Mhm.
But, you know, if you ever have any questions or would like to, you know, see how we're doing, we're welcome your input.
Okay, great.
Okay. Questions with project closeout?
Keep rolling.
On page 9 in your packet is the Out Valley cost forecast, which stands at $37,621,121. The last 4 versions of the forecast are also in your packet. Changes in this forecast from the last one presented on August 9th are increases in both the cable line items as the district used more cable than originally anticipated, and an increase in the Caltrans paving allowance, which will be discussed under risks. There's also an increase in the construction management estimate from Exponential Engineering, which we are working on with RCI and Exponential on.
Now, why don't we have that on the web version? To me, that doesn't fit into either of those that you mentioned about rules about being on the web.
We certainly can put that in. Or we can send you a full package.
Well, you've had it on before, that's why I'm curious, why all of a sudden it disappeared.
And we can also send you a full package if you're interested. Out Valley risks. The project faces a number of financial risks, including the 12 kV overhead tension. As you'll remember, there was a problem with the tension on the 12 kV line. The good news is that this has been fixed. During the clearance, Wilson was able to go up there. PG&E actually got them the correct parts, and we were able to go up there and fix the problem with the lack of clearance. Though clearly a PG&E responsibility, they are completing a responsibility study to determine this, and that's a cost of approximately $77,000. That was going to be a cost of nearly double that, but we asked that they do it on a time and material basis rather than a set rate, which really worked out well because it was our contractors doing the work, and they were able to do it in a couple of days rather than the full week.
So, Michael, are you saying that PG&E may be covering that cost?
I would believe that PG&E is going to cover that cost, but they need to go through this
A
responsibility
study.
in order to verify that.
Are we paying for the study? No, I'm just kidding.
One way or another.
Eventually. I'll pay for the study.
Caltrans paving. Caltrans paving, we put in an allocation for $233,000 overrun due to the snow pole issue that we've discussed in the past, and in 2 areas where we had to come out into the road due to French drains that were installed that were not, that were there, but were not marked through any USA process. Caltrans is not subject to USA rules. So if you do hit Caltrans and they haven't marked it, what Caltrans tells you to do is file a claim with their claims department, which we're planning on doing on both of these areas.
Well, is the, so the $233,000 is now the maximum risk we have on the asphalt paving?
Yes, it is.
And do you have any hopes of that coming down for any reason?
I do, but it doesn't have to do with, it has to do with this issue. It has to do with, while in the section between Silver Lake and Kirkwood, there's a number of culverts that are in the road. And once again, Caltrans didn't mark them out. Our contractor went along at 30 inches of depth, and these could be quite a bit deeper in those, and went right over the top of them. The plan showed but that whenever they hit a culvert, they were going to go underneath them. So they did hit 4 culverts out in the field, and I'm meeting with Caltrans on Thursday to resolve the issue. One of the resolution that I'm proposing to Caltrans is that we replace the 4 culverts that we hit and damaged, and then concrete encase the electrical line around the electrical line where we've gone over the top of these culverts. Remembering that these were not marked in the field because Caltrans doesn't follow USA rules, and we went over the top of them. There are other solutions that would be more expensive, but this is the one that I'm
And that would bring that cost down, is what you're thinking?
I think that Q&D has some liability here, and I believe that that would bring the cost down.
By asking Q&D to do some of the paving.
Right.
But we redig up the road in order to fix the culvert.
We would dig up the road over the culvert areas to get down to the electrical, to concrete encase around the electrical. And we dig up the road to replace a culvert. Now typically, you replace the culvert in half sections, so you only have to replace half the road, but you have to go to good pipe. It can't be rotted pipe, so you go back as far as you do, throw a band around it, run it the rest of the way into your downlet spout. So yes, but Q&D has stepped up and said that they'd be fully responsible for all of these costs. The culvert issue is more of a timing risk than a cost risk.
Why didn't they go under
Why didn't they go under?
where they were supposed to?
Well,
Didn't know they were there.
they were there, they weren't marked out. But they were called out to go under whenever there was a culvert there.
So it's not obvious that the culvert's there, whether it's marked or not, because it has to come out under the road on both sides, right?
Proper survey would have.
Well, sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not so obvious. Sometimes the ends are crunched and you just can't even tell whether there's a culvert there or not. Sometimes it's extremely obvious. No excuse for Q&D. Some of these were actually called out and shown on the plans. And they should have been looking at the plans, but when you're blowing going, you got a man out in front looking for stuff, and
So they were marked. So they hit things that were on the plans that they should have, so they weren't, okay, now I understand.
some were, some weren't.
I know, that's how contractors work. Now I understand.
Asphalt grinding, because we thought that the Highway 88 would be probably 4 to 12 inches worth of grindings on top of it. And that's what we were relayed to by Caltrans. We hit areas that were over 30 inches of asphalt. So that's a considerable amount of asphalt. We may see additional cost because of that. KM Green rock, we were able to place KM Green, the substations, directly on top of a huge rock formation. And because of that, we had substantial costs as far as rock drilling and drilling down into the rock. Fortunately, we do have a contingency in our substation plans. The drilling is complete, and this expense will be within our contingency. So this will come off of our risk list next. As Michelle mentioned 2 or 3 meetings ago, there was a concern that there would be construction inspection overruns. We haven't seen any of those overruns in our current bills. We did see a overage in the Out Valley costs that I'm working on currently now. There's been no other indications. But I wanted to keep this on the list because Michelle had mentioned it. We finalized the chip sealing on Bear River Road. Personally, I thought it looked, and Standish, I know you were out there as well, the grading that they did was outstanding. Really looked good. And I saw some pictures of this chip sealing. It looked good too. Emmer County isn't 100% satisfied with it. We're going to have a meeting next week to find out exactly what they're looking for. and, you know, what they're expecting. I'm actually meeting with the forest supervisor and with Ted Novelli at Clementon County out in the field next week to kind of go through the final aspects. We also did private easement chip sealing. Those are areas that we went onto asphalt that was not owned by Caltrans or Amador County. We have had to chip seal a bit more than we had originally anticipated because these roads, the problem with running on roads that are all torn up and rotten, as Casey could probably mention, is that you tear them up more when you put new equipment on it, and then you have to restore it into some sort of case, and you can't pave everything. It's just impossible. So that is a potential risk.
So Michael, before you read that list, if I went down, it seems like everything on there is cost except the culverts, which you characterize as a possible schedule risk. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And we won't know anything about the potential schedule slip on the culverts until you've met with Caltrans, presumably.
I don't believe there'll be a schedule slip. That's not that's not actually a possibility. We can't afford to not energize on November 1st. So it could be a financial risk for Q&D to have to come back in 2015 and do something. But in my terms, as far as it's September, though I appreciate people starting construction work and you know, having a plan to get that done, I don't think that's the district's best interest. So I couldn't even anticipate doing a worst case repair of the culverts this fall. We'd have to energize and then go into next year, jump up the powerhouse, do whatever Q&D have to do, and then move forward.
So if I look at this list of risks, would it be fair to say that if you have reserves in that $37,621,000 estimate for all of them, but the two biggest unknowns are asphalt paving and culverts? Is that fair to say, or not really?
Well, asphalt paving is in the 37
Okay, so
figure.
that's
We
in
put
there.
the
That's not-
233 in there. Culverts I don't see as a cost. 12 kV I don't see that as a cost as well. Cam Green is covered through the contingency as mentioned. Construction inspection is not. I mean, we've got 75 in there, which we're researching, but if there's an RCI overage, that's not included in there. If we have to do more at Bear River Reservoir, that's not included, but the 48 that we did is in there. So
there's a little additional risk for sure.
oh, there's definitely, you know, financial risk, but we try to, as I identify risk, I try to place them on the forecast so that they're reflected in the current costs.
Any questions on risks from the board or the audience?
I guess I just want to confirm there weren't any actual personnel accidents or injuries? as part of the project?
Though on those windy days when we were setting those heavy poles,
Uh-huh.
it was pretty
There's
dicey.
an opportunity.
Because these are, you know, 100-foot poles on a windy day.
Back to the culverts, so are you saying Caltrans is going to allow them to stay damaged this winter?
No, we could get the culverts that are damaged done before the winter. And I wouldn't believe that they'd allow that. We can either put a repair or replace them. Pleased to report that the supplemental loan is no longer with the FFB, where it has stalled, and it has been approved and sent back over to Russ for distribution. So that's great news. Our supplemental loan is going back to Linda and will be available. The district has requested $5.25 million immediately, with the balance upon demand according to the above schedule, which was approved by the Finance Committee. So this is the drawdown schedule for the $8 million of the supplemental. I didn't know if there'd be any comments from the Finance Committee.
There's a strategy behind this, and I guess to summarize it, the strategy is to try to make sure we get the lowest possible interest rate, and as we accumulate cash, there's something that we can pay down because we can't pay this down early without a potential penalty. So the structure here, for the first 2 years, we're going to conserve cash in case there's an unanticipated expense, capital expense after we go live. And then after that, the rate was based on what we thought was a reasonable conservative cash generation, and then always having a loan to pay down as we can. And the other thing I just remind everybody is the electrical system financially is isolated, meaning that surpluses in there can't be used for any other Kirkwood service. So if we accumulate cash in there, we can't use it for anything else. Its only real value in terms of lowering rates is to pay down debt. And so that's all been designed in and fine-tuned to the best of our ability.
Is there an overall, so our overall Russ borrowing will now be 58 million?
Correct.
And do we have an overall weighted average interest rate for all 58 million?
Yeah, it'll end up being about 3.1%.
3.1%.
And our target was somewhere between 3.0 and 3.5.
Right.
All of our financial modeling was at 3.5, with 3.0 being the upside. So we've come pretty close to the upside. If we're going to pick a period of interest rates to construct, I don't know that we could have timed it any better. Maybe, but I can't see how. So, and then again, but Bob's leadership in identifying Russ as an opportunity is what made it really made it all possible.
District is working on a request with Russ to lengthen the powerhouse depreciation rate from the current 14 years, which amounts to 7%, to 30 years, which is 3 to 3.5%, due to the powerhouse going from prime power source to a standby source. This would have a dramatic effect on electric rates, reducing them by up to 6 cents a kilowatt hour. This request is being supported by a depreciation study completed by Exponential Engineering at a cost of $13,580. A draft of the study is in your packet. A conclusion of the report indicates a 45 to 50 year life, which amounts to a 2 to 2.25% depreciation rate. Staff will be working with Bob Benson on the actual request. Previous discussions with Bob said he was very comfortable with a 3 to 3.5% request. He may be comfortable with even a lower request. We'll just have to see, but this could have a positive impact on rates. We look forward to sending this in as soon as we get the final report from Exponential, get the final letter with Bob Benson, getting this in and hoping for a decision by the first quarter of 2015.
On the B8 draws, when do you expect to finalize the interest rates and get the money?
The terms and everything on the 5.25 have been sent in. So that is sent in, and I would assume it's next week.
Okay, we'll have firm interest rates.
Yeah, it was sent in last Monday, so they've just gotten approved that day. So I'm thinking probably by Tuesday.
Great.
And just to clarify, we'll still have about $3 million left to draw after that, which will all be short-term, so they'll all be fractional, small fractions.
Those will be sent in this week, and we just have on the forms that we'll call as soon as we want it, so it would take 2 days after we call.
Okay, I'm sorry for jumping backwards a little bit, but do we believe now that the $58 million covers all of our needs, or are we going to, with the $37.6 million estimate right now, are we going to have to go into the $3.2 million we have sort of sitting there for this purpose?
Our most recent estimates is that the 58 will cover all of the district, and it will have a 3.2 reserve after the project time. And we'll keep the board updated on that as our list.
Oh, boy. Please keep going.
That conclude, the next one would be item 8D, Stan? Or 8C, excuse me.
Right, where you wanted to cover current status of PG&E negotiations.
Right. So this is a discussion of possible approval of Resolution 1420, approving the revised transmission interconnection agreement and transmission facilities agreement with Pacific Gas and Electric and Kirkland Meadows Public Utility District. This involves our interconnection agreement. The ad hoc committee, which consists of Standish O'Grady and Bob Epstein and the district's staff, has been working with PG&E to revise the interconnection agreement to provide for the 115 kV line ownership change to the district. Currently, remember, we have a current agreement that's on the books, and then we have a revised agreement. The current agreement calls for the 115 line to actually be owned by PG&E with a three-way protection system. PG&E would continue to own and operate the 12 kV underbuild. The district would have to comply with the provisions of the Transmission Interconnection Handbook. We have 5 years to comply with that, the provisions of that handbook. And the district would assume liability of the operation of the 115 kV during this interim period and beyond. I mean, if we own it, we're going to assume the liability of its operation. The change there is, though, that we're relying, during this interim period, we're also relying on PG&E to do their part of the protection scheme. But we will have liability for that forever because we'll actually own it. So the new point of demarcation, as has been discussed, this blue line here is the existing 115 line that goes from Tigers Creek over to Salt Springs. This right here is the new point of demarcation. This is actually where the first pole that PG&E installed is, and it goes over to the new 115 line that goes up that steep slope that we've all seen. A recent wrinkle is that PG&E has asked the district to conform to the standards set forth in their Transmission Interconnection Handbook, which requires that the owner of a transmission line own their own automatic fault protection equipment, and that this equipment be located as close as possible to the point of demarcation. What this means is that currently we have a 3-location protection system: Tiger Creek, Salt Springs, Can Grade. They're all 3 substations. The relays all look at each other looking for a break in the line. If there is a break in the line, everything breaks. And then they automatically try to re-energize. This puts our protection equipment for KM Green under we don't own our entire protection agreement. We own the stuff at KM Green, but we don't own it at Tiger Creek or Salt Springs. The system works just fine, but it's an ownership and location thing. We don't own the Salt Springs side of that protection for the KM Green line. And it's not in a proximity of within 100 feet of that point of demarcation. So we are researching several options at this point with varying price tags. The interconnection revision agrees with PG&E that we would need to conform with the requirements of the TIH, the Transmission Interconnection Agreement, within a reasonable amount of time, 5 years, or longer if we receive regulatory or environmental delays that can be substantiated. A point to Eric is that the revision does not specify the location of the repair or the actual way that we actually conform to the agreement, just that we will conform to the TIH, the handbook. The biggest issue here is complying with the handbook, which could mean one of the possible options is installing a switch station at KM Green, at this location here, or no, at Salt Springs, excuse me, at this location here as previous. That's the beginning. We already have it at the end that would give us our protection separated from their blue line, from their transmission line. So this is the actual location. The switch station could be located between poles 1 and pole 2. And it would be in this flat area. It looks perfect to me for a switch station. It doesn't have a lot of trees, you'll notice. It doesn't. Anyway, we could reroute this road.
Probably not on granite either.
Hopefully it's not on granite. It's much smaller than a substation, much smaller. If we get a single breaker switch station, it's about a third the size of a true substation. It's much smaller. It doesn't take auxiliary power. It doesn't even take a building. That's for a single breaker switch station. A triple breaker switch station, which is another option, would take a building and a
So can you explain why that first option might not be acceptable?
Why a single breaker option?
Might not be acceptable.
Because these relays look up a power line for faults. That's what they do. So the Tiger Creek is looking up this line all the way to Salt Springs looking for a fault. And Salt Springs that's a dual, and they're going to break. Both of them will break if they have that. With a single, they'll still be looking up KM Green towards KM Green because electrons don't know not to look around that corner. With a triple, they would not look up there. If we put in a single, they'd still have to rely on the district to give them the information that the break is on KM Green rather than automatically break it.
And that may not be acceptable to PG&E.
It may not be acceptable. We feel it's a good solution. We feel what we have is a good solution. It's all what's acceptable.
And this is a change because PG&E made a new rule, put a new rule for us?
Yeah.
No, it's because we're taking ownership of the 115.
Oh, right.
Well, this is also new as far as a requirement. It's not a new requirement, it's a new enforcement of the requirement.
I think if we back up, the big picture is it's way too expensive for PG&E to maintain the 115 line. And so we save 8 cents a kilowatt hour, 6 to 8 cents a kilowatt hour by owning it. But by owning it, we have the requirement that we check for faults at the start of our ownership. So moving the ownership changes where the fault detection
Okay.
needs to be.
But this switch station's not in the current budget, right?
This would be part of the money that we've set aside for doing it. And even if we paid the maximum price, it's still significantly cheaper than business as usual. All alternatives are cheaper than the current agreement, but they have varying prices. We have enough cash in the first 2 years to cover what we think might happen.
So that specifically means that the $58 million of loans, for which we think we have $3 million of contingency, that contingency would be the way to address that.
I think what's more likely is we wouldn't really have any material costs until the summer after next. And in that time frame, we will have accumulated about $2 million in cash, and we would use that. And that's the reason why we're not paying down any loans in the first 2 years, is that's likely that would be the source of the money to do it. I think Stanish and I goal is we're done with borrowing. It's now pay as you go.
I guess just conceptually what's hard to understand is there's a solution in place that actually physically works,
Right.
but there's this ownership issue.
Right.
So we put in possibly this single switch solution, which is somewhat redundant to what already exists, which already works. It's just hard to imagine that belts and suspenders don't work. You need belt suspenders and then something else in addition.
Well, you could think that way, but if you look at it from their perspective, is if I'm going to connect into your system, they say, well, you have to make sure you're not causing a fault. And your check starts where you own it. And so we're now saying, well, our check is 1.5 miles up. It's not where we started somewhere else. You would never, starting from scratch, rationally, you'd say, well, you wouldn't do it that way, protect at the start. of your new
Yeah.
stuff. It's just that we've backed into where we are.
No, I understand,
And so
I
that's-
do understand that. The
Yeah.
frustration is, the true frustration is there was a proposal to put our substation right there initially. And PG&E said, no, put it up there. So we put it up there, which required us to run the 115.
Right.
Now we've run the 115, now they're saying,
Yeah.
put it down here.
Okay.
Well,
If we were designing today, we wouldn't have had the overhead. We've
No, I
learned a
I
lot.
understand. Yeah. Next time.
At a
we'll know how to do
reasonable
it right.
price.
Right.
Well,
And the
the
next time
catalyst-
we'll all be so smart, we won't be able to stand it.
I mean, the catalyst was the major overrun in costs on the
Right.
115.
I understand.
And that forced
Yeah.
the meeting that we had to discuss the whole topic.
Your
Now,
frustration is shared.
Yeah.
it is shared, but if you look at it a little bit from PG&E's perspective, one, they did accommodate our request to give us the 115 kV line in a fairly short amount of time for PG&E. Number two, Michael has been very diligently working with them to try and get a revised interconnection agreement because we're approximately 2 months from going live, and PG&E can consume 2 months very easily. And, they got us comments on the second draft of the interconnection agreement as Michael requested this week. And the third is, you can say, and I can say, that it works from a technical standpoint with them owning 2 of the switches for the protection of our 115. One is at Tiger Creek, the other is at Salt Spring, and the third is at KM Green, which we own. They own 2, we own. Well, that works technically. I don't think it works legally in the framework of a large company like that. If I were them, and specifically if I were the executive responsible for this, I would say, sure, we'll accommodate your request, but get your liability off our balance sheet so we don't have to lose money if something goes wrong. And secondly, a lot of those people are career PG&E employees, so the fellow in charge doesn't want to approve something where if it goes wrong, he loses his job.
Yeah.
So, I'm not known for defending PG&E, but I think that they've been pretty good at accommodating our requests and giving us a livable solution.
Yeah, no, I understand all that, and I agree with it. I agree with what you're saying. I'm just hoping we don't have to spend $2 million more.
Well, keep going.
We can't buy or lease, there's already the equipment there?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not there?
No, this is new construction.
This isn't, yeah.
So, the switch station potential cost. This switch station could cost, with environmental and permitting, the environmental aspect would probably be a supplemental to the EIR-EIS. Basically, not a letter to the file, but a supplemental stating that there's a change in our basic direction. We'd have design and contract support. We'd have project management. PG&E costs is an estimate. The construction, I estimated $700 for the single breaker solution and $2 million for the triple breaker solution because of the size. It basically triples the size of the total could be anywhere between 1.3 and $2.6 million. It could be different. I wrote potential when I first did the first draft of this. I had that in highlights, bold, capitalized, and underlined, but I think you get the point. Should the district not conform to the conditions of the handbook after the 5-year period, it's like we don't do the revision. It's exactly what we have today. So the consequences of not conforming after 5 years is the same consequences if we don't revise the ownership of the 115 line would revert to PG&E, and they would own that line. The payment of ITCC tax on the construction costs, $7 million for the 115 line, would have to be paid. At 22%, that amounts to $1.5 million. At 34%, it involves to $2.4 million. If we don't do the revision of the IA, we will owe one of those two amounts this fall. If we don't conform to the handbook in 5 years, we'll owe those funds in 5 years. And then most importantly, the cost of ownership will commence immediately on either we don't revise or the 5-year term. And this is estimated to be $322,000 annually. So these are the exact same consequences if we don't revise and if, the consequences that are listed in the revised IA. So the IA revision comparison, the current and the default, as I just mentioned, the current statement and the default are the same. It's 1.5 million at 22%, 2.4 at 34, and the cost of ownership is 322. If we revise the IA and we conform, or let's say we just revise the IA, November's costs will be $698,000 in ITCC or $1 million in ITCC and $135,000 cost of ownership, which is much more palatable. One other if once we comply with this new version, the need for us to maintain the switching gear at Tiger Creek and Salt Springs goes away, because we won't actually have anything to do with PG&E's protection of that line anymore. That three-way scenario goes away. We have our two scenarios. We have it at the beginning and at the top and at the end. So the reason that we're helping maintain that, and that's what cost of ownership costs are, is maintaining, would go away. And it would seem very clear that we could no longer have to pay that cost of ownership on those improvements at those two, actually all three switch stations. And this is a big deal because it amounts to $2.3 million times 4.56% of cost of ownership, which actually amounts to $105,000 a year. So actually doing the switch station, cost of money-wise, kind of makes sense if you consider if we can get out of that cost of ownership line on $2.3 million forever. All we have is the cost of ownership on a single pole that they installed at the tap point. That's it. That tap point is our cost of ownership. You maintain that pole, it comes down to our switch station. We take over from there. We're done. So we go from $135,000 of cost of ownership charges to a $35,000. Additionally, and this is a little murky. This has not been addressed with PG&E, so I'm not talking about. This is just an idea that's floating. Additionally, the ITC tax on a capital improvement that will no longer be needed between Tiger Creek and Salt Spring will also go away. Is there an opportunity not to upfront those costs, pay a portion of the cost upfront as an expense rather than a capital improvement, because those capital improvements will go away within 5 years? And Standish, I think you've done some additional work on that you might want to address.
Well, I think you have it summarized here
Oh, okay.
with the cost of ownership. In the packet is a spreadsheet comparing the cost of ownership in the ITCC, if PG&E retains the 115 kV, and if we do the first two columns here. And what Michael came up with on late last week, I guess, and hasn't broached with PG&E yet, is, and he's been learning, as we've been learning as we go along, that our hoped for existing configuration, which technically works but legally doesn't, he said that's not going to fly. And then I think we were looking at a load break switch on an existing pole, and you don't think that's going to fly. So what I think Michael came up with was, gee, if we're going to have to build this thing anyway, then the upgrades and switches at both Salt Springs and Tiger Creek are not going to be used when we put it in. So is there a way where we can not pay O&M and not pay ITCC tax on that? And while it's not in the existing IA, I think Michael's view, or at least my view, I guess my question to you is, can we get it into the IA without a lot of effort, without a lot of negotiation? And it seems to me that, we can. We would say if we don't comply, then we go to the situation where you own switchgear at Tiger Creek and Salt Springs. But if we do comply during this period, it's not a deed over thing, it's an operate temporarily thing, and maybe we can get out of both the O&M and the ITCC. And that would be terrific financial benefit for us. Is that should I don't think there's any more we can say at this point.
No, it needs to be run by.
PG&E.
Yeah, PG&E, and I'm gonna do that on Tuesday. But I believe that we have a firm stand on the O&M, if not the ITCC.
Well, from my perspective, the ITCC, anything we deed to PG&E is considered revenue. And so this is just the corporate tax they owe. So they don't, if they don't owe the corporate tax, then they don't typically care that we're paying for it or not. So, but the O&M is actual income for them. And if it goes away in 5 years, avoiding the ITC is a big deal for me. Avoiding 5 years of O&M, yes or no, because that does have to be maintained during that time period. It'd be nice to get rid of it, but having it go away so we don't have it for 50 years is the big deal. But so there's 3 levels of upside here.
I think we'll probably have to pay the 5 years of O&M.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't even propose that we would.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So, where Michael and I aren't completely synchronized yet is, I think, just knowing how large companies work, you either deed it to them now, in which case you're paying O&M forever, and you're paying ITCC, because they got an asset in, they've capitalized their soft costs, and they're depreciating it. Or if we could figure out a way to, for example, reimburse them for their soft costs and lease them the hard costs till the end of the 5-year period for, say, $1 a year, then you don't force them to capitalize the asset now, and they get their costs back just like they're getting their costs back on the rest of the project. And the only way it becomes a deeded asset with ITCC and O&M forever is if we don't comply. And then it's just like it is today, meaning the 115 kV that they own, although the financial consequences for us are just terrible.
And we wouldn't do this for 2 years because of just permitting? Why wouldn't we do it next year, the switch station?
Well, I don't think we could actually design it, put it out to bid and everything else and be ready for construction in spring. I think it's more reasonable that we'd have a complete design and then build it in the summer of 2016. I think that's probably a more rational time frame. I mean, why put everybody under a time stress?
Carolyn, good question. PG&E actually came out with a time frame of what they would require us for. It's a facility study, a new interconnection agreement, and they have a 2-year time frame. So we couldn't even construct until, as Bob mentioned, 2016, because they wouldn't be ready.
Okay.
So why, I'm getting lost in the numbers here admittedly, but why wouldn't we, if they gave us 5 years of time to implement, why wouldn't we maximize that? So it's not-
Because I think our costs, well, all right, so our costs drop under this scenario when we comply. So that would be the reason why. If our costs didn't drop, then there maybe is less reason, but there's also the risk of something else. Let's say there's a new endangered species discovered on, and it's the forest, right? Exciting things can happen, so why wait?
An Indian
See where it is.
artifact site that they don't want you to.
That's peregrine falcon down there by this first impulse.
Yeah, so.
And are we convinced that technically the solution as we're implementing it right now is as robust as what it's going to be after we put in the new switch station? Or are we actually improving our protection of our assets by putting in that switch station?
I would think that we're improving the protection of our assets with a closer, without relying on a 3-way protection system, relying on a 2-way protection system, logically makes more sense to me on an electrical basis than a 3-way, where you're relying on, not only are you relying on a third protection system, but you're also relying on somebody else to set the relays. We'd be setting our own relays, we'd have that responsibility. So it's a good question, I hadn't considered it, but.
So in the interim 2 years, if there's a liability, what's the risk of something actually happening that would end up with a huge liability?
We have the liability no matter what. So the risk doesn't change for us. We always have the liability. PG&E just doesn't want us to temporarily transfer it to them during the interim period. So we're just acknowledging the liability we think we already have.
Michael, do you have more, or is that?
PG&E has asked for, they're realizing that we're meeting today. Next steps for us is to revise the IA as we've discussed today under scenario 3 compliance option. And also they'd like a Gantt chart showing the various steps. I'm going to go out and get Gantt charts for dummies, but to actually show the various steps that we take, because one of the things that we're committing to is to use best management practices to get this done as quickly as possible. So if this could be done in 2 years or 3 years, we're committing that we're following this chart and that we're doing it in the best management practices fashion. So we need to produce that, and then we have a very aggressive signature revision schedule that I've forwarded to the board. But we could have this done by September 22nd, which I think would be terrific. So due to all the factors and the possibility of $105,000 savings, as described, staff recommends approval of Resolution 1420, which would give President O'Grady the authorization to sign the interconnection agreement in council with the general counsel, district staff, and the ad hoc committee, who is Bob Epstein. In consultation with those 3 individuals, we give him the authorization from the board to sign that interconnection agreement as revised.
And I would just add to that, we can't go live without the revision. And the revision has to be approved by FERC. So I don't really think we have a lot of extra time, which is the reason why we think it's pretty substantially right. There'll still be some improvements we've described, but we'd like to, that's what we're recommending. The Finance Committee is recommending the authority to finalize it, allow a quick response time and not another board meeting.
Comments from the board or the audience? Questions?
The only comment I'll make is, even though I haven't completely understood all the ins and outs of this, I think I understand it better now. I have to say, you guys have been really creative in navigating through this, so I thank the 3 of you for doing that.
Thanks.
And I guess you want to ask the public first, then be prepared to make a motion.
Any input from the public? Questions? Michael, do you have a recommendation, or you've made it?
Staff recommends approval of Resolution 1420.
So I'd like to move that we approve resolution number 1420 as discussed.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. So moving on to 8E, discussion and possible approval of PLA, participating load agreement between CAISO, which is California Independent System Operator Corporation, and the district to establish the terms and conditions the parties will discharge their respective duties under the ISO tariff. Manager Sharp. And I believe this has been considered by the planning committee, so you'll have some comments.
Just that it's the last step that we need to take to be able to finalize our relationship with CAISO, and it's the right time to do that. I will cover the specifics.
Brandy's going to take this agenda topic.
Morning. So our participating load agreement, or the PLA, is our 3rd agreement with CAISO. And as you know, the resource adequacy issue was brought before the board before. We are required to cover 115% of our forecasted load with a source of power as a backup in case of system emergencies. And this PLA is the CAISO's document for this RA compliance. So what we have proposed to CAISO is that since our internal generation of the powerhouse is sufficient to meet all of our needs, that rather than purchase RA off of the grid, we will simply drop all of our load as requested by the ISO in the event of a system emergency. We have already, on March 8th, approved a local reliability plan that detailed that load dropping scenario. And the PLA before you today is the technical details of how we'll do that. So what we're going to be modeled as is a curtailable load. The Schedule 1 in your packet, which is at the back of the draft agreement, gives the details of how much capacity we have available, our maximum operating level, and how quickly we can drop in the case of emergency.
Randy, can I interrupt with a question?
Sure.
This is my one question on this document on Schedule 1, where it says maximum operating level 3.2 megawatts. I know that that's realistic today. Does this document survive over many years, or is this modified from time to time?
It is modified from time to time. So the analyst recommended that we put in a footnote saying this is our current maximum winter operating level. But what we will also be required to do is from time to time, if our peak level grows a lot, we will have to update this agreement. And we'll also have to submit a curtailment bid, which is basically going to be our day-ahead forecast bid, so that the ISO will be able to look at our day-ahead forecast and say, all right, they can drop half a megawatt at 2 p.m. on this day. So it is going to be an updatable document.
Can I ask, when you talk about an emergency, you mean the whole grid would have an emergency and we need to get off it? Or are you talking about an emergency in our own system?
An emergency either on the whole grid or in our section of the grid. So if there was an emergency in this area, we might be required to drop.
So just to put it into realistic terms, the likelihood that the California grid, CAISO, would actually ask our measly little, 3.2 megawatt to turn off because they need that we need to shed load is very unlikely, especially since California's needs are in the summer when we don't even hit a megawatt. So we're just a hiccup in the grand scheme of things.
But is this something like when we had those brownouts years ago kind of thing?
Yes. And so the final part of the PLA is a draft of our implementation plan. That was put together by staff and it's under review with the ISO as we speak. It talks about manually opening the breaker at the powerhouse within 60 minutes of a real-time call and reclosure happening at the same time. The 60 minutes was chosen for our convenience, and it might be revised by the ISO, but we're going to have someone on call who might have to travel from here to the powerhouse in a snowstorm. We wanted to give ourselves a little time. So are there any questions on the PLA that is presented in the packet?
You guys have considered the planning committee and recommend approval? Yes. Any questions, comments from the audience?
Is that someone like you, or does that have to be one of your technicians? I'm just curious.
The person that would actually go open the switch. It would be one of probably 4 people, myself included, the current powerhouse operating staff.
Greg?
So I have a question. First of all, what's the means of communication between the grid operator and you? Is that done through a remote intelligent gateway, or do you get a physical call? What's the means in which you get
We'll be getting a call.
you get a phone call?
Yes.
And then the question I have is how long does it take to spin up the powerhouse so that it could handle the load?
It should, under normal circumstances, take less than 10 minutes. So if we're under a normal circumstance, 60 minutes would give us time to get there, turn on the generators, make the switch over, and not experience any sort of blackout here.
Thanks.
And this is still in draft form. So staff is recommending that the board authorize the president to approve the completed agreement once the ISO sends that back to us, provided there are no substantial changes.
So you're looking for a motion for approval? I'll move to approve unless you want to.
Well, yeah, I'll move that we authorize President O'Grady to sign the participating load agreement once the final draft is completed.
So substantially in this form in consultation with staff, I guess is.
And I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. I think I might have skipped over 8D, which is discussion and possible approval of change order for Wilson Construction overhead component for work performed on poles to correct manufacturing errors. All costs to be charged to the pole vendor costs $18,400.
Yeah, this was a, when we received the poles, I think you remember that one of the poles was actually cockeyed, so it didn't line up correctly. Other ones didn't have the little lips for the ladder guards, so that you could actually put a ladder on it. All of these changes and problems resulted in costs for Wilson Construction, but they're all being charged against the Thomas and Betts pole manufacturing contract. So we have their retainage. We're going to charge this off, this $18,400 against Thomas and Betts. So this isn't a direct charge to the district, but it is a change order to the Wilson contract. And so staff recommends approval of this change order.
I didn't see anything controversial about it. Anybody else on the board?
Pass through it.
Yeah. Any comments from the audience? I'll move for approval.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moving on to 8F and G, I think you said you wanted to take these together, Michael?
Yes, thank you. With the Out Valley project, with the change of source of electric power from the powerhouse to the Out Valley, we need to change the structure of our rates. We need to eliminate our fuel adjustment charge used for diesel charge. And what we'll see is a change is that we'll need to eliminate our fuel adjustment charge, reduce, we'll see a reduction in the powerhouse operation and maintenance expense because the powerhouse will go from a 24/7 to a limited operation. We'll add in the power purchase expense, which we don't have now. We'll, of course, have an increased debt service, and we'll have an increase in our Out Valley operations and maintenance costs. So putting that all together, we need to change the methodology behind our rates. Additionally, the 14-15 budget calls for a 4.6% rate increase in the variable portion of electric rates effective November 1st, and that was approved at the June meeting. So the change, not only showing that the fuel adjustment charge goes away and the rate increase, is basically a change from 64 cents on the variable portion to the 68 cents. Then the forecast, our budget, shows that the rates actually start declining each year after this point. They go to 65 in 2016, 63 in 2017, 62 in 18, and 60 in 2019. And this is not considering potential rate decreases due to the powerhouse depreciation study or other factors that we discussed today. The way that we calculate what we pay to solar energy net metering customers who generate more than they consume, the net generators, needs to be recalculated as well. Currently, we pay the voided cost, and what the district doesn't have to pay because they're producing power. And what we don't have to pay is diesel costs and a portion of the O&M at the powerhouse. And that equates to 33 cents a kilowatt hour. This will need to be changed. Now the avoided cost is actually the power purchase cost and a reduced amount of O&M on the powerhouse. So what that actually would be, we estimate it to be approximately 13 cents. A change that will be discussed at the public hearing would be that we would actually calculate that after the fact rather than before the fact. So we actually know the charge and we can calculate that. But with all these changes coming up, the staff recommends for the board to call a public hearing, receive public input, and consider these changes at the October 11th meeting.
I have a couple of questions. So, and a couple of comments. So, as I've mentioned before, what I key in on is the number that we all discussed, a very large audience, in September of 2012, which I look back at Howard Barnes' presentation was around 65 cents a kilowatt hour, someplace between 64 and 66 cents a kilowatt hour. And I believe that that was an all-in number. This 68 cents does not include the $21 a month base rate charge, which amounts to something like 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour, maybe 6 cents a kilowatt hour, depending on usage of electricity. So we're really talking about something like 74 cents rather than 65 cents compared to September 12th, September of 2012. And I really like to explore all options of bringing that down. Now, you've identified a number of things, like significantly the depreciation of the powerhouse would am I right that if we're successful, that would decrease the 68 cents by 4 cents to 6 cents, I think the packet said. So that's a big step in the right direction. Does the 68 cents assume that we own the 115?
Yes, but it does not, the 68 does not assume that the power has depreciation, so that would be a reduction.
Okay.
Does it include the switch station?
No.
No, it doesn't include any of that issue so far, which could net bring it down, right?
Or,
So we have there's a potential opportunity to bring what I'm thinking of is the 74 cents down to the high 60s, all in.
Well, just to comment on that, I
Sure.
think that $21 a month fixed charge is significant if you weren't here this month. You know, and your refrigerator used a few kilowatt hours. It's insignificant if you're chair 6, right? So I think the actual, it's $18,000 a month is what the fixed costs. And so I'm not sure the math.
Well, it's just, I was just thinking.
It might work on your own bill, but I don't.
No, well, as you know, and we'll be talking about it and
Yeah.
exploring what an equivalent dwelling unit is
Right.
and how much electricity that is, and I think it's around 4,000 to 5,000 kilowatt hours a year. So it's the $250 a year, $21 a month,
Okay, so
divided by that EDU amount, if I'm reasonably
Right.
accurate in that, that's what it comes out to be. So that's
yeah.
on average.
So I think a good exercise at the hearing would be to look at the prior data and identify what are the components of the changes.
Yeah.
And to see where those came from. The other thing I'd add in is that the July bills had a rate of 0.698, which rounds to 70 cents. So the proposal here actually at 68 cents actually is a marginal decrease.
And that was because of the fuel adjustment?
Yeah, that's the primary factor going on.
Yeah, so I
So I think it's important to understand every component of the difference between when the plan was approved
yeah.
and what we're about to do and where they came from and why.
I agree with that, but again, to me, we all set a goal for ourselves, that's why I think of it in September of 2012, of about 65 cents, a peak of about 65 cents a kilowatt hour, and I'd like to get I'd like to explore all options for getting as close to that as possible, that's all.
Yeah.
And one thought, again, just to at least consider, and I know that the $3.2 million is there to help fund other things, possibly, things that we still don't yet know about, but using $250,000, I mean, one of the original ideas of that fund was rate stability fund, so that if we had a peak, a spike, we could bring the spike down, and we would make up for it by not bringing it down to trough as far as you might otherwise. So the rates were a little bit more stable. Well, $250,000 out of that would knock, I think, about 3 or 4 cents a kilowatt hour off the rates.
Well, so a couple of comments on that. One is we are using property taxes for exactly that purpose. And the reason why is our rates have, the tier ratio requirement of us. If we use a set-aside fund to pay for it, that's not revenue, so we'd still have to keep the rates up. So I think property tax is the alternative for doing that, and as you know, we're using that. The other thing I would suggest is if we look at the cost of having a home that uses 0 of any resources for a month in Kirkwood, but you have water,
That's what I was just
propane,
gonna bring
and
up.
electricity.
You don't do anything and you still have this huge bill.
Thanks. So I think we do have to look at we decided various ways of having fixed costs. And so I think it's getting close to $150, $160 a month if you're not here. And we may want to look at the total, and we have some flexibility in what's in the variable cost and what's in the fixed cost. We may want to look at that as an aggregate as well.
Thanks. Do you have any other?
No, that was it.
Any comments from the board?
I got a question.
Actually, before you go, if that's okay, I was supposed to say that the planning committee has considered this. Do you have anything else that you want to say?
The main thing we've done here is saying, what do we need to do to comply with our loans? What are our costs? What do we need to do to comply with the loans? And then what are alternatives for driving down the peak cost? And again, the peak cost really happens because we're in a fiscal year where we have 2 facilities. And so the main way we can manage the peak is what we've done, which is using property taxes to try to manage the peak, and then be able to, the biggest opportunity next year would be if we can get approval to depreciate the powerhouse at a different rate. And then secondly, the PG opportunities. And then over time, well, the biggest way to keep rates manageable would be to have a good ski season. That was the other factor this year. So we have considered all of these things, but we don't be compliant, to show that we can be compliant with the Russ loan is a priority, and that's what really drives the rate.
You have something you want to say?
I have a question. This, I'll call it a proposal. This proposal assumes that we're running on the national power grid 100% of the time, and on the powerhouse virtually 0% of the time. And my question is, if for whatever reason we are running the powerhouse, say the line goes down for a month and it takes a while to fix it, does this structure allow for billing it at the actual rate at which we would be making the electricity, including burning diesel and fuel adjustments and stuff?
No, this would consider diesel as just a normal operating cost, and there's no diesel fuel adjustment charge with this rearrangement of the rates.
So if you're on diesel power only for a month, how do you have a way to present a bill and not
Well, you can present the bill, it's just we don't have to manage, the fluctuations in diesel in a month are pretty different than over, an extended period of time, so it really isn't worth the overhead of dividing out separately. And I also want to caution you that the 8-cent charge isn't even true currently, it's higher, right, it's 11 cents, so.
But wouldn't it be more expensive to be running on the diesel generators if that was how we were making the electricity?
Yeah, it is, but we've assumed they're running in test mode, and so those costs are aggregated in. And I would assume that if we have to go on the powerhouse for days or something like that, that we can absorb that. And we have enough cash reserve to try to manage things. So I don't know in our first year of operation whether we want to assume a huge downtime with no experience.
The proposal is to build this new way regardless of how we generate delivered kilowatt hours.
Yeah, and then the question was if you end up having to generate the power in a more expensive
That
manner. do you
we
say,
would a couple months, we don't have a cash flow problem. A couple months later, we would have a public hearing to adjust the rates. If it's materially different, if it's a 1 cent difference, I assume we would just
Makes sense.
eat it or adjust it with property
Yeah.
taxes.
No other questions?
Stanley?
Before you open it up, Nancy, so
Sorry.
Eric, I tend to agree with you. Every time I add up my bill, it says 74 cents. You know, that's, you take the total electricity, divide by the dollars, and I think I sent it around to you and to Michael, saying thanks for the bill, or to Bob, he's the billing expert.
Right.
However,
Just present it.
there's a time when obfuscation is probably good. This is not that time.
No, that shouldn't be our job.
But, you know, I would feel if we do 68 cents, we're able to get through a 6-cent depreciation savings, and we have 62 cents, and not subject to the diesel fuel balancing account, you know, fluctuation. I feel better about that.
That'd be great.
So that's the goal with this depreciation study, I think. Any other, Peter, any comments, questions? I'm sorry, Nancy?
So my question was, so what is the anticipated timeline, timeframe for these rates, these new rates? In other words, when would the board possibly be entertaining new rates again, up or down?
Well, the notice says, and I do have one request for the notice, which is that you put a line between the first paragraph on anticipated cost reductions. The notice says we would probably consider them annually, assuming we don't get the depreciation adjustment. And so it's saying 68 cents, Michael recited it, 68 cents in 2015, 65 and 16 and all that. And unless you have a different recommendation or thinking, I think we'd be thinking about it annually. However, if we do get the depreciation approval, I would expect we would do that as soon as we got the depreciation approval.
Okay.
And I think Michael said the target for that is the first quarter of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Did I get that right?
I think you were marvelous.
Caroline?
Well, I want to just emphasize my frustration with the bill when you don't use anything as an owner, that I'm not here in the shoulder seasons normally. But also, as an owner where I lease at least 2 units to either guests or employees, it's difficult. I ask them to reimburse utilities, and they look at it when they conserve and conserve and conserve, and they still have to them a huge bill. So, anything we can do to bring it down. It's really hard when you're a landlord trying to, people just don't believe it.
Wouldn't of those remote meters be paid off?
That was a 6-year or 10-year?
10-year?
And then we're in the second year of it,
Well, some of them just started, the water meters started this year.
but in terms of assessing, we're in the first year of assessing 7.
Depends on the meter, right?
Yeah, so it's all different.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
we
the
put in
electric
propane and electric at the beginning, and then we put in water. We're actually currently putting in water, so those timelines. but,
Within 8 to 10 years, those will be gone. Those costs.
So nobody's going to feel the benefit for a while.
Any other? Yes, Bert.
Hello. I'd like to urge the board to explore any avenue to try to minimize. I know it's supposed to increase over time, but this is very high rates that we have now, and I think it hurts a lot of people. Some people actually are struggling with a bill at this stage. Anyone I talk with, I find a huge increase in the utility bills. Anything you could do to help decrease? I know you have constraints, like you have built the cash reserve, and which is done, but now you are still paying more because of the Rust constraint. But maybe you could pay off the loan for the water meter or things like that, so we don't have this extra charge. Try to make something to make it a bit palatable. I mean, it's going to improve over time, but for now it's really painful for many people.
Okay. Any other comments from the audience? So, somebody want to make a motion to call a public hearing?
Well, I'd like to move, and the Finance Committee also recommends that we hold a public hearing to explore all of our options, show all the data, and evaluate about a cost of 68 cents as the revised rate.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bertrand, I'd just like to encourage you, if you have any ideas, let us know, because we're with you. I mean, we'd like to get the costs reduced as low and as quickly as possible.
My general philosophy is we should try to spread that huge investment we've made on the longest period, not the shortest period, so that more people during the valley contribute to the effort, instead of putting all the load on the current owners and current users of the valley. So, as I said, if you still need, because you have this 105% requirement for the rest, you could use some money from the tax base to pay off other things that actually impact people, like the meters. Irrigation, water, gas, electricity, 4 meters, that's $12 or $11 a month. So anything you could do to alleviate this other expense, knowing you are constrained on the electricity side because of the rest, but there is other avenues you could explore to try to minimize the global bill.
Yeah, one of the things, just a point, because I think, first of all, I think you're right. I think we all want to do that. But one of the things, for example, as soon as we know we have sufficient cash to do, is we're going to pay off a particular loan from CalPERS, which will reduce our employee costs by 3% a year.
Yeah, that's good.
And that will then filter all the way through all the utilities charges. So that's the kind of thing we're definitely looking at, so we are doing those things. And again, I will point out that I'm pleased that we were able to reduce the propane rates by significant amounts last month, or 2 months ago.
Yeah, since I have all the data in front of me, propane was 9 cents in December, and it was 5.5 cents last month.
So we're done with 8F and G, I think. Moving on to 8H.
So we all need to get propane refrigerators? Is that what we need to do?
If you want continued high electricity rates.
I haven't done the math, so I don't know if I can recommend that or not.
Can I ask one more question? Is there going to be a packet for that hearing? I can't make that hearing. Is there going to be something published or posted?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
8H, discussion and possible action regarding the method for calculating the district's electric capital connection fees. Discussion and possible approval of proposal by Kennedy Jenks Consultants in the amount of $4,000 to analyze existing and alternate calculation methods. Manager Sharp, and I think the Finance Committee is considering this.
Eric Rickard has put forth a recommendation to change the methodology in calculation of our electric connection charges. Currently, the district takes the improvements needed to serve additional units and divides this by the projected number of future connections to come up with these fees. We've also researched and know of a buy-in method which takes the current balance sheet value of all fixed assets divided by the existing and future users to come up with a fee. Eric has come up with a fee with the goals of a buy-in fee that actually fairly distributes the cost of the out-ballot project amongst all ratepayers, current, near-term, and later arrivals, resulting in lower fees, which does not slow the rate of development. And these are off his actual slides. It creates a buy-in fee that ties into the $37 million project cost, reflect the years of the benefit that the project will receive, that a property will receive by being connected to the grid, and creates fairness through a buy-in fee and payments through the kilowatt per hour electric rate. So I didn't know if Eric wanted to...
Yeah, let me, if I may just... So I've long thought that, well, and it was definitely reinforced when we went through the capacity charges that were the basis for the connection fee, that only $1.6 million out of the approximate $37.6 million of our costs are related to increasing capacity to our build-out needs of 8 or 10 megawatts. That means $36 million of that cost are to buy the benefits that we all discussed over a period of 12 or 24 months, which were the reliability benefits, the environmental benefits, and the cost stability, or at least the cost predictability benefits of the Out Valley project. So it seems to me fair that everyone who connects to this system pay their fair share of those $36 million worth of benefits. And so, Michael, if you could go to the graph.
I don't have the whole.
You don't have the graph.
Sorry.
Right now, the way things stand, as things stand right now, with the connection fee only covering the $1.6 million, what it means is using a variety of assumptions that are all in our loan documents and our capacity planning and so on, so not making up new assumptions about growth rates and so on. As it stands right now, the average dwelling unit or average equivalent dwelling unit, bringing in the lifts and so on from the resort, who are connected as of the beginning of, as of November 1st, will, over a period of, and I'm simplifying, 30 years of debt payments, will pay about $30,000 towards paying off that debt. We understand from our exponential engineering, and because we are also charging depreciation rates, and we're also charging O&M in our rates, that our system that we're building right now should easily last 60 years. So the benefits that we're buying for $36 million should last 60 years. So those of us who are connected to the grid now, or the properties, and those of us who occupy those properties, and of course our successors over the years, will pay $30,000 for 60 years of benefit. So that's on average $500 a year for those benefits. Someone connecting right now, as things are, someone connecting in year 30 will get 30 years of benefit but pay nothing. So I think that should be rectified, and that's what this proposal is about. What it proposes is that by calculating, and Kennedy Jenks or someone more qualified than I can do a more detailed job than I've done, but the idea is that you calculate what those who are connecting on November 1st will be contributing on average over 30 years to pay off debt, divide that by 60, and that become what I have termed a unit of buy-in fee. And so if a person buys in year 10, well, let's say $30,000 divided by 60 is $500, a person connects, or a property connects in year 10, that property would pay $5,000 buy-in. And that $5,000 of buy-in plus on average what they will pay to pay debt service off for the next 20 years will result for them in about contributing about $25,000. So they're paying less than those of us connected now because they're getting fewer years of benefit, but they're paying their fair share. And a person connecting in year 30 would pay $15,000, 500 times 30. Would pay $15,000. Debt's paid off. So they aren't contributing anything more to the debt payments. Debt's paid off. But their $15,000 will buy them 30 years of benefit. And then someone connecting in after year 30, if there are any more units to connect, would pay for their years of benefit. So if someone connecting in year 40 would pay 20 times 500 or $10,000. Person connecting in year 59 would pay $500. You're connecting in 60 would pay nothing. So that's the idea. The idea is that everybody pays their fair share, and that we use these funds to more rapidly pay down debt if that's possible, to reduce rates in other ways if possible, to fund new capital projects without having to borrow money related to electricity if that's necessary. But everybody pays a fair share, basically. So that's the idea.
Can I ask a question? What you just talked about, simplistically $500 per year, is that what, and there are two parts to this question, is that what somebody would pay through their rates for debt amortization? Or is it the sum of what they pay through their rates and connection charge? And so the second part of the question is, if somebody connects in year 2, aren't they paying 29 times 500 plus the connection?
So a person, those of us who are connected on day 1, would pay $30,000 on average entirely through rate payments.
Right.
No connection, no additional connection fee. Person in year 1 would pay $500, and the remainder of their contribution would be through rates, and that would be $29,500 approximately.
So you're talking about an additional connection fee to what we currently have?
Yes. Yeah, this doesn't cover the $1.6 million of capacity. That's already in there. This is in addition to it. This is to pay for the benefits they're deriving out of the $36 million of construction costs.
So if I can just add on to that now, to the public. Currently, with 58 million of debt, 26 cents per kilowatt hour is debt service. That's what we currently have. And then the next biggest component is depreciation on the equipment, on the line, which is a similar number. And then the rounding error is the cost of power and labor. Right? And that's where we are. Just to put a number behind it. But the goal of this proposal right here is to have an independent firm who's studied our rates before look at this to say, do other people do it? Does this make sense? Do you see any problems? Compare it to the other 3 things. If you get a third-party assessment from somebody who does rate structures for a living, we thought the next logical sense, because what Eric is saying makes a lot of sense to me, to get a third-party opinion of the merits behind it. And then after that is done, sometime next year, we would look at this in a public hearing to say, here's what we learned, here's what we think, and to get more public input on it before we would make any decision. So that's what's before us right now.
But to answer your question, if you look at the graph, which I think
I will
you've
see
seen
the
in the
graph.
Finance Committee, it's just basically a declining line. I mean, in the end, it's the total amount paid for those connected for 60 years, to those connected for 30 years, to those connected for 1 year. It's a declining line. So those connected for 60 years pay more than those connected for 30 years or 10 years. But everybody pays their fair share, their pro rata share. That's the idea.
Before we open up, any other comments or questions?
The only other thing I wanted to say is in the Kennedy Jenks proposal, I just wanted to be clear that what I'm proposing is additive to the $1.6 million related capacity charge.
Eric, have you considered the option of a standby charge on undeveloped property for the use of electricity?
I can tell you,
As an
I considered
alternative?
that 4 years ago, 5 years ago,
Yeah.
but it never made it to
Well,
the surface.
Because,
But I didn't know
because
it.
with that methodology, I'm not saying I endorse it, but hypothetically, that would reduce the rates quicker.
Yes, this is only as properties connect. What you're
Right,
suggesting
I mean,
is it's
to me,
private
that's
properties
the-
connect.
That's the flaw in it, is that, is you're not gonna reduce rates quickly. I mean, I understand the fairness concept, but, I mean, that's how EID funded the sewer treatment plant that we now use. Because originally, we just said that in the lake plan. I know it's a lot less money, but could we possibly explore that as an option in this Kennedy Jenks study?
It'd be fine by me, you know.
That's, I'm just
It would
asking,
be fine by me. I don't know,
as an alternative.
yeah, I just don't, when I explored this 4 or 5 years ago, even, I think, I'm not even sure I was on the board yet, but certainly people who owned a lot of property, namely the resort at the time, were not exactly warm to the idea of paying a standby fee prior to development.
Well, sure, I understand. But the situation's changed considerably in terms of the
I know a standby
expenditures.
fee is a mechanism that utilities use, so. it's awesome.
So, Michael, my understanding of this, and I guess this is a question, is Kennedy Jenks going to look at our overall electrical connection fees, or are they going to assume that what we have in place is just going to stay and this is incremental? Because my personal view is that they should look at the overall, the whole thing, because when we started down this path, we said, hey, rather than get a consultant and save some money, just do a quick and dirty internal. And so my personal view is I'd like to have them look at the whole thing in the context of what other people do, as opposed to just some incremental connection fee, incremental to the quick and dirty thing we put in place this summer.
They're going to look at our electric connection fees and the 3 different options. 2 of them are interconnected, as Eric said, are existing, and his would go hand in hand. But yes, Kennedy Jenks would look at all 3 of the different options that we've heard of, come up with a recommendation of what we feel is best.
Well, maybe also our options, as broad a range of options as possible, including what Peter mentioned. Before we open it up, any other comments or questions?
I think it's an important topic. It's come around several times in discussion, and trying to put this to bed in an organized fashion, I think makes sense. So it's something that we all explored carefully together. We've put a nail in it and move on.
Okay, so broadest range of options in the whole electrical connection topic. Any comments, questions? Bertrand, I thought you put your hand up first.
I just think the model is going to have to be a bit more complex to what you suggest, because you cannot ask the people connecting 10 years from now to basically pay for all the years they were not here. So I think there is a middle ground that you need to find.
No,
If-
what I'm
if-
proposing is exactly that.
Yeah. So, but I think it would be actually a fair way to actually spread the load on many more years for the users. Yes.
Caroline?
Okay, I have several things. I think what you're proposing sounds very fair. I think what you're proposing is extremely unfair to an existing property owner. I mean, I'm already paying, I own undeveloped lots, and if you come back to me and say, now I have to pay an electric charge and I can't afford to build a house for 20 years, I think that's very unfair. So if you were going to do that, I think it should be looking at any new sales, just as they did with the KCA. The KCA, as you put the rule in, you buy, you have to pay, but they didn't go backwards to people who already owned. So I would propose you look at it that way. I do have a couple questions. One is, could those funds be used for other things, or would they have to be used for electric?
I would, well, it's not up to me, but I would think it would have to be used for electric.
And my second question is, are you going to charge the same connection fee to a little studio condo that you're going to charge for a new lift, who's going to use 10,000 times the power?
And pays for it.
I mean, they're getting, a big user's going to get a much more.
Thank you.
Much bigger, but they're going to get a much bigger use of that capital asset than a little studio
The
condo.
way it would work is this concept that Michael's used in capacity plan of equivalent dwelling unit. So if a lift uses a lot more power, and we obviously understand that, let's say 3 times the average house, you would be charged for 3 times that equivalent dwelling unit amount
In the connection fee.
in the connection,
Okay.
under my idea.
Okay.
So when you said that you thought this would be used only for electrical projects, would you think that it would be possible to use the funds to eliminate the charge, the meter charge, the electrical meter charge?
It could be used, I would think it could be used for any of those things. It could be used, for example, to help pay the electricity that's required for our wastewater treatment plant and bring down the water rates and the wastewater treatment rates, But I would think that they'd be used in the world of electricity rather than in the world of, say, fire protection.
It's an electricity connection fee, I would hope so.
Yeah, so for mingling the funds, it would have to be used in electricity. Whether it could be used for anything except connection or what it was intended for, it would have to be used for what the charge was explained to the public for, whether that be maybe debt service could be included because debt service is in the proposal, but any connection charge has to be segregated and placed into a connection fee account.
And I just want to make something clear, I'm not saying I endorse the standby fee, I pay standby fees.
I'm giving my comment.
In the past. I'd just like to see a comparison to see how that would affect potentially the rates over a period of time. It might not be feasible, but it might be quicker in reducing rates. Potentially, I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'd just like to see a study done on it.
The other thing I want to add, Bertrand asked one other question, which is the time frame of debt. And our strategy is as long as possible. But when we've accumulated cash, because we have to charge for depreciation, that's generating cash, we always want to have some debt to pay down as we accumulate. So the only stuff that's short term are lined up with expected cash where we could pay down. Because when we pay down debt, we reduce rates at the same time. But everything else is 35 years. Almost everything is 35 years except for about $8 million or so, which is lined up with our cash flow.
So Michael, just to clarify your statement regarding the connection fees have to stay in that connection account, but you are saying it could be used to reduce rates in electricity or meters or debt. I mean, I got confused by what you just said.
I believe that if you charge it for electricity, it has to stay in the electricity account. Now, how in that electricity account can connection fees be used is a question that we need to ask, because it's a good question. But I know it has to be segregated from like water.
Right, okay. And so who answers that question?
The rate consultant, we've used
Okay.
Kennedy Jinks in the past, Alan Zelinka, to help us set our electric rates a long time ago. And staff recommendation that of hiring a third party, Kennedy Jinks, for a cost of $4,000 to analyze all three of the different proposals, look into the standby fee, and have a broad array of options for a cost of $4,000.
So at this point, I'd like to make a motion to approve hiring Kennedy Jinks for this purpose.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we hire Kennedy Jenks to study the broad range of connection and related type fees associated with electricity.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
You want to hold the vote up?
Let's hold the vote open. We can. And move to 8I, which is another non-controversial topic. Discussion and possible action regarding the future of the district's snow removal services operation. Manager Sharp.
But I do have a cool picture, so if nothing else.
I haven't seen that for a few
It's
years.
really nostalgic.
Yeah, it is nostalgic. It's a powerhouse road, and that's the new RPM Tech with a 950 loader on the top of it. So, Casey, that's what it looks like.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Big snow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
10-11?
10, 11. An idea has surfaced to change.
So Bob, we voted on retaining Kennedy Jenks.
We're voting.
So 8H passes unanimously.
Sorry, I had to sprint. Couldn't help it.
An idea has surfaced to change the homeowner association-based current snow removal contract system to a property owner fee like water, electric, etc. Back in time, solid waste was actually a homeowner association fee. I think it was KMA actually came to the district and asked us to take over solid waste services. And we would contract out with different varying homeowners associations to manage their dumpsters for them. And we had all of the condominiums, and it seemed fine and dandy. And we said, well, why don't we start putting this on their normal bills and just charging for it as a service throughout the valley? And that's exactly what we did. We made it a solid waste services is now a bill for residential and condominium properties, and it just comes out on a normal bill. And we went through a Proposition 218 process to complete this. The same thing could happen with snow removal services. So we would would get out of a situation where we would contract out with the homeowners associations. We would just provide this as a service like water, wastewater, et cetera. For the district, it allows for long-term planning. It allows for long-term purchases and improvements where you can have a guaranteed income as you go. The service fee has to be commensurate with the service provided. It's one of our public utility issues. So this would probably be based on square footage service. And everyone would get a snow removal bill on their utility bill. Is exactly what happens in other communities such as South Lake Tahoe, Bear Valley, and the list goes on and on. It's actually very unusual for a public utility district to have to contract with homeowner associations. Typically, when a public agency handles snow removal, they do it through an assessment of some sort. So as detailed in the memo in your packet, Dick Shanahan has outlined the steps that it would take to actually change this homeowner association contract into a service-related fee. The district must take several steps and complete studies to move this along. We have to do a study called the service charge study. How much would it be per customer? I could see that there would be different classifications of a single-family residence with a driveway and one without. I could see different condominiums, those with driveways and those without. You have to come up with a rules resolution. Proposition 218 is fairly vague in exactly how to go about this. So you would actually pass a resolution that says one vote for parcels. I personally, and Dick actually endorses, think would be the best way of going about it instead of having partial owners, etc. You'd have the service area map. Who's going to be included in this with APN numbers? You would have a public hearing notice. This is a notice like we just did for the rates, where you would do a study and you'd get the details that you learned from the first 3 items out to the community. And you'd start a community outreach program, where you would actually let these people, let the public know of what you found, and what the policy is. You'd establish a public hearing where there would be a protest hearing, and what that means is that if you got a certain percentage of the owners that actually protested the hearing, your motion stops and it ends at that point. But if you don't have a protest, then you can continue. You call an election. This would be a district-run election. This would not be an election of the county. It would be that expense. It would be a ballot form that you would send out. You conduct the election. You need a 50% majority approval on a parcel-related property owner thing. And if successful, you would implement the new district service. And I would envision that trying to do an April timeframe would help associations get it onto their budgets before the meetings, and you would enact the service before the 2015-16 years. So that is the concept, and district staff is looking for direction from you.
Before we open up to the board and the audience, is there anything you'd like to say, planning committee level?
Well, I think, this is something we want to look at pretty carefully. We obviously would need to understand how does this look to individual homeowners and members of the community. Because it could be quite different. I mean, Michael's touched on some of the positive benefits of it. But, if you think about it, if you had a snow removal bill that came every month and was different every month, as it snows more, the bill goes up. If it snows less, the bill goes down. In one respect, that seems good because it kind of synchronizes, billing to physical reality. But the way that certainly our HOA does this is completely the opposite of effect, right? You bill everybody the same amount at every quarter, and that ends up paying the snow removal bill. So there's flat payment. So I think there's a lot to this, and how it looks to members of the community is just really important to understand better.
Before we go, that schedule, do you think that's realistic with everything else going on? Or, frankly, it looks a little aggressive to me, but do you think it's realistic?
Sure, it did yesterday when I put it together. Now I'm having second doubts. No, I feel it's realistic, and I think Nancy brought up a good point in our meeting. I think it might have been the Finance Committee, is that the associations need time to digest this and get it out of their budgets if this was successful. So, yes, I believe it's realistic.
I think the Finance Committee looked at this, and the driver for this is the fact that private companies have a hard time undercutting us and then staying alive in doing this. So we've already seen that sort of making this a market-based activity isn't really working out, or at least we have evidence to that. So if the majority of driveways and streets are going to be handled by us, is it cheaper for everybody to make it a standardized service? Or is it more cost-effective to do, a contract with every house and every homeowner association every year? And so I think we at least want to know the answer. Would it save everybody a lot of overhead? And allow us, we know how much we would have every year, it would allow us to purchase the equipment, whereas, next year nobody could sign up. Could the stability of the business enable us to do it more cost effectively? And so I think we at least need to know, is there a more cost effective way to do all of this? And there's, in that process, if somebody says, I really like shoveling my driveway, it's why I own a driveway, I don't want to pay, there may be, I don't know how many people are like that, and I don't know which streets are affected, but I think we at least need to understand, if we are the primary snow removal service for the valley, is there a more cost-effective way for us to operate? I think we have to at least know the answer to that question and then see whether the public wants to do it that way or not. If they don't, then, we know how we're going to operate. So that's why we're encouraging trying to do this.
Peter, anybody else have any comments or questions about whether we should do this?
I can see where this would be very controversial. But, sure, let's explore it.
Yeah, I think the exploration is good, because I mean, to me, it comes down to the arithmetic of, can the homeowner association reduce dues, at least as much as the enterprise service would cost. And if that's the case, then there may be other benefits to go ahead and do this. But since I don't know what that answer is, I think I'd like to find out. I do think that in East Meadows, I think is unique in that we are required to have all driveways plowed. And that's why it's always been done by either the contractor or the district, whomever we contract with. Well, what that means is, which I think is fair, is that Standish will no longer subsidize the removal of snow in my driveway, because he's got an undeveloped lot that gets charged the same amount even though he has no driveway. That will change, and so the cost will be placed on those who actually have driveways and taken off of those who don't. So this is in East Meadows.
Particularly steep driveways like yours. You like decided it costs more money to service at one account versus another.
No, but I got great snow storage space, which they really appreciate.
You have to take that into account.
Plus, they use the inside
I
of
know,
the garage
guys.
for maintenance purposes, so I get it. But anyway, I think it's definitely worthwhile exploring.
I think the public might have some comments on this at the appropriate time, Standish.
Well, we're running out of the board ability to interfere with that, so I'd like to open up the public comment. And actually, I'd like to ask you to comment, Bertrand and Caroline, on one subject, which is, as Eric pointed out, our East Meadows dues are about $600, and I don't know if you guys have driveways or not, but we're told that 75% of that is for snow removal, so that's $450. My PUD bill in January and February is about $1,200 a month. My PUD bill in July is about $400 a month. So I assume I'd get a bill, or if you were in my shoes, you'd get a bill for $450 divided by 3, that's quarterly, right? So $150 extra. In the context of both you showing up for the last several meetings talking about costs and talking with your neighbors, how would you view that? Would you say, hey, the PUD is charging me another $150, or would you look at it on a net basis, and what do you think your peers would do?
I mean, this is a complex topic because difference to water, gas, and electricity, the snow the snow removable need is actually extremely variable. It's variable because of seasons being different, but also, let's say you have someone with a long driveway with a lot of slope, it actually doesn't collect as much snow than a flat one. So you could, you have a lot of consideration, and as it is now, it has to be explored. But yes, if you get more services, I understand that my PUD bill now is bigger because I have the electricity and the propane, and used to have only the water and the waste. So I don't have a problem with that. But the idea of that actually is maybe to actually reduce the cost for the whole valley, not increase the cost. If I'm paying less in my HMA dues, that's fine. I think people can relate to that. Yeah. But it is a complex topic, and I'm very. I find our schedule very aggressive. Yeah, but like Nancy said, if you cannot make it by April, then you have to lose a year because of the HOA cycle.
That's okay.
Caroline, did you have?
Okay, I can see why the district wants to do this, because you're basically gonna eliminate competition and smooth out your
That's the
own,
opposite reason.
smooth out your own budget. But, okay, I can see why you want to do this. Are you including Kirkwood Meadows Drive? No.
No.
All right, so who's really subsidizing all of you with the houses is the Meadows, the Towers, and the Snowcrest under this scenario. Because if you're gonna go by square footage of unit, that's
No,
what's
no,
really
asphalt.
unfair.
Asphalt.
Driveway.
No, it's proportional with the service provided, so it's not square footage of units.
Okay, I thought you meant square footage of
Asphalt.
unit.
Asphalt.
Well, how are you going to do, I can see, okay, the Meadows has this driveway, but what about the Palisades? You're gonna take the entire Palisades Road and now say that those 6 houses have to pay for it? Is that what you're saying? As opposed to, it's different where you've
Well,
got a
that's the
lot
way
of
it's
houses.
That's what they do
That's
now.
exactly
No,
what it
right
is.
now, every lot, we've got 30 lots paying for that
Yeah.
road. In that scenario, and I'm not one of the ones with houses, that's great for me, I don't have to pay, but you got 6 people then who are gonna pay for that entire
Carolyn,
road.
Carolyn, this would all be studied, but I'll just tell you how I envision it, because I've thought about it because of the East Meadows situation. Is all properties being serviced by a road would pay their proportionate share. All those with driveways would pay for their driveways. So Palisades has 6 houses, 6 driveways. Those people would pay a bit more because of their driveways, but all the properties that are being serviced by the road would be billed for their proportionate share of that road.
So you're gonna have to look at every single property then. A lot has this, put a road, and a house with a driveway has that road plus this house, and a Meadows studio condo has 1/100th of the driveway. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
And a
Yes.
Meadows two-bedroom condo has 3/100ths of a driveway.
It's arithmetic.
Okay, well, that sounds fair.
Yeah, no, it has to be fair, and it has to be, in Bob's, community outreach, it needs to be portrayed as being fair, and that it's based on a proportionate share of service. The only thing that we haven't considered is things like Eric just brought up or Bob brought up, is the difficulty of removal. Right now, it's pretty easy to do the arithmetic and say you have this much square footage and you fit into this group. What we haven't considered is the difficulty of Eric's driveway and how much more we're going to charge him.
Did you have any other comments, Caroline?
Well, I'm trying to think, if you're not doing Kirkwood Meadows Drive, to me, it gets complicated when you look at, particularly around Meadowstone and Snowcrest. I don't even know who owns or plows what, but
Both of those have parking spots on Kirkwood Meadows.
that you plow?
That we plow.
Yes.
Okay.
So we know the square footage, and actually every association gets an Exhibit A, which shows the square footage of what we remove for them. So the complication in my aggressive timeline, some of this work has already been done as far as knowing what the square footage is, and I think, besides Eric's driveway, it might be an arithmetic issue.
Come look at my driveway.
In fact,
It's one of the best driveways around.
I love your driveway. I think it's super.
Okay. I think you need to look at condo size, because right now, when I own a studio, I'm paying a certain amount on my HOA bill. And when I own a two-bedroom, I'm paying a lot more. So you've got to also look at the size of the condos in the building, if you're gonna make it fair. Not
And,
just how many units there are.
It's hard to proportion that to the service provided.
Well, no, I don't agree. If I have a smaller building, smaller unit, I have less people in there, less vehicles, and less usage than a larger condo, or than a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom, a huge lodge condo. So I don't think it's fair to look at just how many condos are in the building and how long the road is. I think you need to look at the square footage, or the unit dwelling, as you called earlier, the dwelling unit.
I think at this point, we're just deciding whether or not to look at it.
Well, I know, I'm
And
just
how-
giving you
yeah,
my
as opposed to
thoughts
how. Okay,
about
good.
what's fair. A studio condo in the Meadows is way different than a huge lodge unit, and that proportion should be looked at differently.
So if nothing else, I'm convinced after this discussion that it's more complicated than I was thinking of. No surprise, but almost everything that we touch, at least in the planning committee, is as sticky as the floor of a cheap movie theater. So I think this is
Right up your alley.
good. Not exactly what I was going to say, but yes, I think it's good for us to explore this, because I think it is, with only one motivation, to be clear. The only motivation would be to have a business that is running at higher volume and more stability, so that we can deliver better service at lower cost to the community members. That would be the only motivation. If that works, then it might come forth as a proposal. If that doesn't work, that we find out that it's not not more efficient, then it would be pointless. Mike?
Still has to be an elective process. I mean, if some people don't want a driveway to be plowed, you cannot force it on them.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. It's forced on them today.
In our subdivision, yes. I don't know about you.
It isn't secure.
Yeah,
So that's what I was going to address, was KMA. So KMA is everybody, whether you're developed, undeveloped lot, everybody pays the same amount of money.
Yeah.
It's assessed once a year with your annual assessment. It's due, that you pay it all at once. And then if there is a, you don't call it a refund, what do you call it, rebate at the end of the year, we all share in that in the following year. And if somebody has a driveway, because obviously KMA was started long before driveways and garages were ever thought about. If you have a driveway, you contract with the district separately. And so that brings up another issue for people in KMA. People decide, oh gee, I want to add a garage, which then means, they're going to have a driveway, so it's something else to think about as you build that model. And then I just have one last question, just for clarification. Under item 2, where it says 1 vote per parcel, does that mean per APN number? Okay, thank you.
So just as an observation, your billing mechanism is different from East Meadows, because we pay 4 times a year association fees. And if there is a rebate, it gets cranked into the association fees, the next year's 4 quarters. I had another thought, but it's slipped away.
Well, I think it is true, by the way, that no one can be forced to have their private driveway serviced by a public entity. The one exception that I know of is East Meadows, because it's a county, it was a requirement of the subdivision that it be so.
Well, one of the reasons you get things like that, which seem like it would be a more universal truth, is if there's a fire in the middle of winter and you don't have your driveway plowed, how's the fire department get to your house?
That was the reason in East Meadows that it was, but I don't, anyway, this is all something to be looked into, but my intuition would say that if there's a driveway in KMA that the owner does not want the service, that the service can't be forced.
Yeah, it could get quite complicated. If there's anything that...
Palisades has that either. I'm not aware of a requirement to plow the Palisades driveways.
It would seem like if there's a way that the logic of this might fail to deliver more efficient service to the community, it might be in the sense that the KMPUD people would have to spend a lot more time setting up individual homeowner contracts and managing through the issues associated with those contracts.
But that's what's done today.
That's what we
already.
do today.
But it's done at an HOA level.
No,
Not for
no,
drug
I
use.
pay,
No,
no, that's the thing,
Not for drugs.
that's the point I'm trying to make with all this, is if we're the only snow removal service in the valley because it's not economical for for our competitors to come in, which is what's happened this year, then if we're the only contractor, is there a more efficient way to operate than me signing a contract every single year and Michael signing everything else? Is there a more efficient way to operate if we're the only provider of the service in the valley? Because we're already doing contracts with every individual home that wants it and with every homeowner association. And there's I watched Kathy spend all day on Friday printing out the contracts and the rest of that. Is there a more efficient way to operate? If the answer is no, then it's business as usual. If the answer is yes, where does that cause problems or complications? That's what we really want to understand.
Okay, so in KMA, you sign an individual homeowner driveway contract with the district, is that correct?
That's what I do.
Yeah, individual homeowners sign, they contract, they either choose to do it or they choose not to do
And is
it.
that the case in
And that's the
Palisades?
same in Palisades.
So the only
I
outlier
think
is
it's
us.
just East Meadows.
I guess, you get an opinion, you get an opinion, Caroline, but on the elimination of competition thing,
I don't know.
when I'm not in a PUD role, I'm a venture capitalist, and that's all about competition. And so I've seen it from both sides, from how both hiring KMR as the initial snow removal operator and Dale Rice for about 8 years, and then the group that just left, and then I've seen it from the PD side, which is the inability to plan, the headache of signing individual contracts, and I strongly encourage exploration of this. So that's kind of my opinion, is that as somebody who loves competition, I think there might be a better way to make it work here.
I just don't want to feel like I'm subsidizing the houses if I have several little condos in the meadows. And I think, there's a lot of people who own little condos, and if you're going to do a vote like that, you're going to lose on that one, I think. Unless you look at the size of the condo.
Can I just make a comment, Standish? KMA did look at trying to explore contracting with other independent contractors out there, and they came and took a look at KMA and said, you're too big for us. So it's the PUD.
Well, you're not too big for the PD.
Yay.
Is it the consensus of the board? Are you looking for a motion, or you're probably looking for a motion?
I'd like to move that we direct staff to explore this alternative mode of providing snow removal services
I-
to the valley.
I think the wording of this is critical.
Okay.
That what we're really looking for is, if, under the assumption that we're the only provider, is there a more efficient way to manage the long-term, snow removal than what we're currently doing? I think the phrasing of this is critical, because I don't want somebody to read the minutes and think, well, we're in a power grab, we're looking for more things to do. If we didn't have to do snow removal, I wouldn't mind at all. But we're being asked to be the only provider by the absence of competition. Can we do it more efficiently if we standardize the process?
So move.
I'll second that, realizing just how much fun this is going to be to discuss for months to come.
I guess my only request is that we do it in an inclusive way, where we try to be as fair to the studio owner and Meadowstone as possible.
Well, Prop 208 guarantees it, because this is only going to be decided by a vote of the property owners.
Right.
It's not going to be decided by us. All we can do is put together a proposal.
But that's why I'm saying, as you do the study, if you don't look at, I don't know how many houses there are, 50 in the valley or something like that?
Well,
And
we
you've
know
got-
that there's about 800 meters.
I know,
Yes.
but you've got several hundred condo owners with almost no square footage of pavement versus, say, 100 single-family owners with lots of pavement. So if you're going to come down to a one parcel vote, if you don't consider those different sizes of the buildings, you're going to lose for sure, and all this work and time and money, I suspect, will be for nothing. So that's my take on it.
Thank you. So we've approved that.
We haven't voted yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
Care to comment why or prefer not to?
I think you're going to.
Pandora's box?
Yeah, I think we are, and we haven't even talked about the biggest property owner in Kirkwood.
The one that
And
does-
I don't see how you can form a Proposition 218 district without including all the property owners. Well, but that's all I'm going to say.
Would we not? Well, would we not? This is the biggest
So-
property owner is the resort, right?
Correct.
Okay, so then being almost completely ignorant with how the property, how the resort does their snow removal, bills for their snow removal, looks at this topic, all I would say is, what do you say?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we would want to retain, as we are currently, Kirkwood Meadows Drive. That's our gateway into the resort and the gateway into obviously everybody's home. So we would always want to remain that to be exclusive from whatever consideration you folks are talking about on other driveways and such. So we're not talking about that, so.
Right. In some sense, that's a free subsidy we get.
Yeah.
In order for you to do business, we get to drive on the main road.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to change that.
I just don't know legally how you can gerrymander a district.
The same way that we did solid waste. The resort
No.
has nothing to do with solid
Yeah,
waste.
But originally, what they did,
We did for a while, and then,
yeah.
but that was back before 218. We actually did 218 without incorporating.
All right.
So what you do with 218 is you actually can form it around whatever properties you want to. You don't have to, it's like a Melrose. When we did the Melrose, only undeveloped properties. A 218 can be around the subdivisions and the condominiums, as long as you're providing a service that's commensurate with, or providing a, doing the charge commensurate with the service provided.
Okay, well, I still abstain.
You might feel good at the end of it. So 4 for, and 1 abstention.
Okay.
And moving to 8J, discussion and possible approval of revision to policy statement 620, conditions of service regarding responsibility of owners to provide and maintain a conditioned space for meters. So this is something that's been on the agenda before, was pulled the last time, is that right?
Exactly. We pulled it, we didn't have the attorney's language in it that's now been incorporated. I think Dick did a good job on tailoring it down for just the subject at hand. Basically what policy statement 620 does is it establishes responsibility for service lines so that the service lines on private property are the responsibility of the homeowner and not the district. It establishes that public property that we're responsible for the locating on our property, but not that of public property. It establishes the owner's responsibility for the location and protection of the district meters, so that they have to protect those meters with an enclosure, and that they have to keep those free of snow and ice. So it needs to be free of snow and ice. They need to have a snow shed on it, and they can't be putting storage like ladders or something up against an electric meter. And then they need to be in a conditioned space, and that's only really pertaining to water meters, but water meters need to be in a conditioned, meaning temperature controlled space, so they don't freeze. And then it basically cleans up inconsistencies with the policy and takes out any language of the delinquencies in it. So with these changes, and knowing that we've discussed this in the past, staff recommends approval of policy statement 620 by the board by motion.
And the committee also recommended, didn't we, Eric, I believe?
Yes, although we haven't met since the Dick Shanahan language has been
Okay.
added. I do have Michael, I have 3 questions. One in paragraph C, non-liability of district. I'm just curious, Is there any respect, I mean, I think this is a statewide public agency kind of a thing, but under what circumstances are we liable for damage to a private property? Is there any circumstance?
If we delivered a service that caused damage, then I would assume that we'd be liable under our negligence, though we do have policies that talk about, you know, it has to be district negligence. It's not like an act of God.
Yeah, I mean, because this lists all the things, the non-liability of the district, and I was just curious if there are under any circumstances in which a public agency like ours is liable.
We only think of negligence.
My second one has to do with paragraph G. I had to read the first part of this over a whole number of times, and I think that, I don't know if anybody else agrees, read it that carefully, but there's one sentence that seems to be misplaced and confused me from reading it, and it's this. It starts out saying that district facilities shall include only that portion of the utility system which the district acquires or constructs by action of the board of directors. The district's ownership of and responsibility for operation, maintenance, repair, and replacement facilities are described below, and that's all fine. Then it has a sentence that says, the owner is responsible for locating, operating, maintenance, repair, replacement of all other services, pipelines, etc. That sentence seems to be misplaced to me, and I kept thinking, well, it says the district's ownership. Is the owner referring to the district? Is the owner referring to somebody else? I didn't know. I assume it means the private property owner, but this is a paragraph about district responsibilities, not property owner responsibilities. So I just thought that sentence was misplaced and probably not even necessary. I just found it confusing in the policy.
Could you lead me to that sentence again, please?
This is section G on page 113.
113.
First paragraph, last sentence of the first paragraph.
Basically call US digs.
I mean, I'm not sure whether that sentence is properly placed in section G. That was my comment or question there.
The owner is responsible for the locating, operating, maintenance, repair, and replacement of all other service-related pipelines, wires, facilities, or other utility and system improvements. The importance of that sentence is the locating portion, which is highlighted. The owner is responsible for the locating of all services. The reason that this originally came up is that the district was asked to do service locates on new property. This new property could be in KMA, which was built in who knows, and we could have the liability of trying to locate service lines on properties that we never installed, had no idea of being there, and we would have to basically install 4 new services for each property if we were responsible for locating services on private property.
Okay, then I understand that. So even though I would have crafted this a bit differently just to make it a simple change, can we just say the property owner? Because this comes right after the sentence that says district's ownership, then it says the owner.
Okay.
And I said, does that mean the district or does that mean somebody else?
Yeah, the property owner.
So the property owner just makes it clear.
I understand that.
And my last one was paragraph J, which is place of use of water, resale prohibited. I understand that the resale is prohibited, but I was just curious about the part that says, no customer shall use or permit the use of any water furnished by the district on any premises other than that specified in the customer's application for service. I mean, if a neighbor asks to use water out of my hose for something, they can't do that.
Well, it says temporary situations.
For resale, you want to,
No, not for resale. Anyway, it's just a nit, so I'll skip it.
I would think that falls under temporary situations. I mean, you're not gonna, who's your neighbor? Bob Andy, you're not gonna supply him with free water.
No, I wouldn't have given, I would sell it to him.
Even to wash your driveway.
Yeah. So we'll skip that up, it was just a curiosity. Okay, that's all I had there. That's good.
Any comments from the board other than that? The audience? Nancy?
So Michael, as far as like enforcement and, you know, you probably learn things as you put in meters or, you know, reinstall meters. You know, is there any kind of driving force that you know there's some blatant problems out there where you're gonna go back and be able to say things to get change behavior regarding some of these things you're trying to change?
No, good question. It all stemmed from the service locate.
Okay.
That's what started it.
Okay.
And then I started reading through the policy, Nancy, and I go, well, what about this and what about that? So it was just a general cleanup.
Oh, okay.
And the storage of keeping 3 foot in front of electrical panels and keeping your propane, these are just good ideas.
Right.
And having, having a proper snow storage. It's just, we've been through some of those too. So we know the importance of having proper snow storage and for, propane valves. So just to clean up.
Thank you.
Carolyn?
I'm going to go back to his comment about water. In the meadows, we have irrigation pipe and use it on property that isn't ours to make a nice wildflowers around the building. And I know in the Palisades, there's been discussion of owners wanting to irrigate the common space to again establish wildflowers. So that does have a problem in that sense. I know we're irrigating property that's not ours in the meadows because our property line is so bizarre. You couldn't irrigate it if you wanted to, the way the line runs. So,
Yeah, that has been in that policy forever.
okay, well, he brought it up.
Yeah, no, it's not a change that we just did. It does say temporary on it if the board wants to. I would have to go back and try to figure out why they put that in originally. I'm not coming up with any real reasons why you couldn't, if you're paying for it, why you couldn't use water on somebody else's property.
So do we want to vote on, is your recommendation to vote on this, or?
And then you could look into that and see if we need a clarification.
Okay, so with
Instead of you having to decide
with the change in the property owner that Eric mentioned and the caveat that we'll look at that as a provision, staff recommends approval.
Well, the other thing you could do is we could take out that addition, except with the prior written authorization of the district in emergency or temporary situations. If we just took out the proposed addition of in emergency or temporary situations, the district could agree with the Meadows or Palisades or whomever to, what do you think, Eric?
Why don't you just keep it a resale clause? I mean, I agree, no one should be reselling water, but
I think that's a separate issue. It says resale now, and J, the proposed addition is the district could only agree with you in emergency or temporary situations. Did I get that right, Michael?
I'm happy to leave it as is and ask Michael to look if we need another revision, instead of trying to figure this out.
Yeah, I mean, if we could bring it to the capital operations committee just to talk about it.
Let's make sure there aren't any unintended
Yeah.
restrictions.
So just briefly, if we're kind of done with that, I think we are. I think Nancy brought up at the point about enforcement, and if you found somebody who was not compliant, what do you do? Is there a mechanism for encouraging or insisting on compliance? And I think you, in the last year, had at least one incident I can recall where you had a very lively discussion with the homeowner about the maintenance of the area around your meter.
If a customer doesn't follow the policies and procedures of the district, we have the right to turn off their water. Or, actually, we have the right to turn off their water if they don't comply with any of the utility districts. So if they non-comply with electric, we can still turn off their water.
You don't want to turn off the electricity because it could be heating the house with it, you could be bursting their pipes as a result of turning it off.
so that's when their neighbor would obviously give them water.
Hence the reason for the policy.
Oh, that's the reason. Okay, that's the reason.
Okay, so Michael, are you comfortable with that? We're going to keep that in emergency and temporary, and you'll look into it, go back to the planning committee?
Operations.
Excuse me, operations committee. So I'll move that we approve this with the one change that we discussed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So 8K we've deferred, but since the proposed revisions to the employee manual are in there, if you could read it and get any comments to Michael, just so we don't have to visit that for the first time at our next meeting. 8I, presentation tour of district's propane storage and distribution system, discussion of propane security capital project plan. I know there's some proposals in there, and I know we talked about a tour. How do you want to handle that?
I'd recommend that the district listen to Brandy's wonderful orientation, and then at the end of the meeting, go out there and take a tour.
Great.
And I'll keep this short. So just as an overview of our propane operations, as you all know, our bulk storage facility is out here on the road. We have two main tanks that store both liquid and vapor propane. A liquid mixture is delivered into those tanks, and the tanks are piped together so that they level. The liquid mixture is taken to our currently two sets of vaporizers, direct fires and water baths. And those units take the liquid propane and vaporize them to a certain pressure, which we take out into our distribution system. So this is a picture of the direct fire, the older redundant units. And these are the newer water baths. So both sets of vaporizers come together at a common area, which is then introduced into the propane distribution system right out here on Loop Road, which flows throughout the valley. So I'll be happy to go into the different components and the different areas in more detail when we are out doing a little tour. But if anybody has any general questions about the propane system, I can answer those before moving on to security.
Just remind me, do we service 100% or do some people have their own private tanks?
We do not service 100%. There are a couple of private tanks throughout the valley, and a larger percentage of customers don't have propane.
Great. So, Caroline?
I know the fire code in recent years has added a lot of rules for a lot of hazardous materials. Is this location up to code now, or will it be, or have you looked at that?
It's something that we should double check. I believe it is up to code now. I don't know what proposed regulations are coming, so I'll add it to my list.
Because generally an old facility is not up to code, and
Yeah, we are. We have been inspected by the CPUC propane division, and we are up to code to that. Any new regulations I haven't heard of, but we would strive to be in compliance with that as well.
Why don't you proceed to security?
Okay. So our capital plan for security includes an enclosure around the bulk tanks. We are thinking of a 6-foot fence in the main propane yard area, about a 25-foot perimeter around the tanks. We have a Tahoe fence estimate for a chain link fence that's in your packet, I believe, for an estimated cost between $16,000 and $20,000. Per the Capital and Operations Committee, we're also going to look into a cinder block enclosure rather than the chain link fence to see if that's more cost effective. And then at the water bath area, which is shown right here, you can see there's a lot of piping and valves exposed. The plan for that area would be to erect a shed with a leaning metal roof that would shed off the back of it and enclose that with a fence. There's also a Tahoe fence estimate for that enclosure, not the shed itself, just the fence, for about $4,000. And those two improvements would protect all of our equipment and all of our valves that run the propane system. So that is in staff's hands. We are taking a look at the cinder block wall, and we plan to come back before the board with a plan on
You need to be, I'm sure the code is different on cinder block versus fence because of the risk, the explosion risk is completely different if you have a leak and the impact of an explosion. So you can't just take the same footprint and make sure you look at that before you get an estimate that is not correct, won't work.
Is there anything you want to say in the Operations Capital Committee, Clint?
We weren't prepared to make a recommendation. We wanted to explore both the concrete wall and the fence because cyclone fencing, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't stand up very well to snow. So.
Well, and if it's a 6-foot fence and we have 3 feet of snow,
Right,
that
exactly.
isn't much of a barrier.
So we would
Even
probably,
for a
we were
small
looking at
people.
probably a combination, doing a concrete block up to a certain height and then maybe a little security on top of the concrete block.
Is the goal here security or protection from snow?
Well, both.
And is this a must-have or is this a nice-to-have?
It's something we're supposed to have. That's my understanding that we
I don't
have,
think
that we
it's-
don't have.
Yeah, I haven't seen a regulation that we do or to provide security. So I would think that it's a good management practice to have security around those.
It just seems to me that we're kind of vulnerable.
Well, I would agree, walking around, but I'm also sensitive to cost. And
Right.
Presumably, this operation's been running for 30, 40 years.
Well, not in its current configuration, it hasn't. It was worse in the past.
And actually, the district did put in a security fence in front of the dispensing area,
Right.
which took away the opportunity for, obvious theft and obvious areas where they could get
It's
out.
just, petty vandalism or.
Right. So we've already taken the first step. Possibly next step is to secure the area that's shown in the picture there. Not only do I have concerns of security, but that's a lot of little pipes for Kirkwood, and I think a shed roof over that might be a good maintenance issue. Is to good preventative maintenance is get a shed and a security around that.
Well, roofs and sheds also add in the code for something like that. So again, you can't just build whatever roof or shed you feel like. You have to look at the fire code for that because of explosion, again, because of vapor explosion issues.
I guess my request is when it comes back, that there be an integrated plan with integrated costs.
That's what the committee is looking for.
Good.
It may need sprinklering too, by the way.
Is there anything else on 8L? Good, we're done with 8. Michael, it's all you on 9.
Quite a few items. I'll go relatively quickly. If there is any questions, please let me know. Water rights, we're still pursuing our perfection of water rights from Caples Lake. We've had positive reviews. We came before the board on August 9th with 2 proposals, one from the water rights, not attorney, but organizer, Nick Bosnian, and one from RCI. We're going to have a kickoff meeting in early September to get that rolling and pursue those rights as discussed. Had our fish stocking this last Friday. 3,000 pounds were deposited into Caples and Silver Lake. 66% were catchable, with the rest of them being trophy. So I guess trophy isn't considered catchable, but that's the determination. I think catchables are smaller than trophies, which are not as catchable. So we're in I think that's a 10-year program, and I think we're around year 6 in it. So we still have a few years to go of depositing fish in the lakes.
Do we know if the fish population is increasing or just supply and demand?
Michael, can I ask a quick question? In the board packet, or it talked about some kind of committee. Is this something that is, the district's on it, there's other public agencies that are participating in a fish committee, I guess is what it's called?
It's not really a fish committee, it's the EID settlement committee.
Oh, okay.
So what it was is that there was a League to Save Sierra Lakes. It was a settlement. There was a Project 184. The district is actually a member of this fish committee. It has quite a bit to do more than just fish. It has water level rates, how much they can drain down cables, and there's parameters and what the flows are. And
I understand. I just saw Fish Committee, and I just thought, that sounds a little unusual.
I think as part of the settlement, EID is paying for this and we
Yeah.
implement it.
right. And then the committee is actually to ascertain that EID is doing everything that they committed to in the settlement, including lake levels, flow rates, things like that.
Thank you.
Loop Road Phase 3. The Loop Road Phase 3 was to connect the vaporizers that Brandy mentioned earlier, that area, over with the oil shack that sits over by the vehicle maintenance shop. That's kind of the last area of direct buried in our system. This started because of the April 12, 2012 direct short that we had. We did Phase 1, then we did Phase 2. This is Phase 3. So the project would be to dig over to the oil shack around to the transformer at the vaporizers and replace that direct buried electrical with a conduit system, and more importantly, to connect our propane system from right up here, a 6-inch line that we have now found, to the 6-inch line that's sitting out here in the meadow to give us better pressures throughout the valley and to hopefully give us more redundancy on being able to backfeed. We have been researching the location of the propane line, because when you think about it, the propane line makes Phase 3, Loop Road Phase 3 makes sense. If it doesn't have the propane line, the Loop 3 electrical line is redundant. We can go from either side, and so suddenly the Loop 3 electrical is exactly like that line that goes from here down to Lodge at Kirkwood. It's redundant. It's direct buried. We can use it. We don't have to use it. We can use it in emergency situations. But why replace it if it's not part of the system? We could actually stand it off and still have the same sort of coverage that we have now, because we have coverage throughout. So we can run it through the lift circuit or residential circuit. This just gives us an option that we can have. So the propane really makes why Phase 3 makes a lot of sense. So we've begun our investigation, and we actually dug up a section over here by those hay bales, and you can see that we've covered it up. And going a little bit deeper, we found some volcano lines, and that's effluent lines, and we kept on digging, and yeah, I think you could see it right underneath there is a propane line, 6-inch propane line, about 7 feet, 8 feet deep underneath volcano, it's underneath everything. So it's in a really bad location. Then just recently, Vail was digging for a new project, an approved project at the side of their vehicle maintenance shop, and they uncovered these 6-inch propane line. So now we found it here, and now we found that it goes all the way over there, and it takes a right-hand turn, which means that that 6-inch propane line could come all the way back down to Loop Road. We don't know, because there's no wire on it, exactly where it goes. So it's the district's goal is to start potholing and try to find out where it actually goes, because we can't connect to it unless we know where it goes and if it's got pressure. So Loop Road Phase 3 is a huge amount of question marks at this point, and we'll bring it back before operations and capital once we know more.
And can we assume the former owner doesn't have any maps?
Oh, I think you can assume that.
Yeah, we have
Not
all the
anymore.
maps. Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. We weren't presented maps.
So we are working on that, and we have informed Vail that we have found a propane line underneath their building, which
I'm sure they're thrilled.
they're thrilled.
Which building is that?
It's for waste oil containment. We were out of compliance at the shop facility, so we're getting into compliance. One of the many things we're fixing.
So I think we'll be fixing along with
We share your pain.
So this
You
is
don't know
probably
if this
not
is
a
active.
project for this year.
No, I don't think Loop Road Phase 3 is going to be in this year, and I really question, if we find that propane line comes down, I really question whether we'll do Phase 3 whatsoever. You know, once you look on a map, it might not make sense.
Right.
I'm pleased to announce that if you drove here today and just didn't magically appear, that you might have seen a wood chipper in our parking lot. It is engaged, it is out front, and we'll walk by it on our tour, but it has been purchased and it does fit on and work off of a trackless, right now it's on T5. So the wood chipping project, the newsletter is out to the board now. It'll go out on Tuesday announcing the wood chipping project in-house, and we'll be starting to do that in September.
So Mike, I have one question about this in my walk here, so I didn't see the thing. There are properties with just piles of tinder, almost stacked on top of each other, almost like designed to start a fire. So do they have any obligation to clean up, or could we offer a service where we'll pay the costs of doing it, as opposed to them dragging to the driveway? Because to me, you know, it looks like a huge hazard.
Sure. Right now, the board has authorized us to go around 2 curbs if the board wanted us to get onto private property.
Well, I'm just suggesting that if we know of properties that have stacked very old, dry stuff, that we notify them of the risk and suggest that they drag it up. And if they don't have the time, you know, they're not showing up till the ski season, can we offer a time and material thing? They just take care of it for them rather than leave the fire risk there.
Well, one of the big problems is the Palisades, where we had that storm last fall, and we, on the board, we would like to get owners to participate, but we are having trouble even getting them to, some of them to take care of their existing obligations, let alone future. We had so I know some of the problem is in the Palisades, and if there was some way to get help that we could present, I mean, I have a board meeting in about 10 days, it would be a big help.
Yeah, so I'm just asking whether it's feasible. If the homeowner can't bring it all to the curb, could they pay us to?
Or won't.
Well, separate from enforcement, just as a volunteer, we can contact them and say, here's what we found on your property. Do you want us, this would be our cost to dispose of it. Otherwise, if you drag it to the curb, we'll do it for you. Is that something we can consider in the name of reducing the
I
fire?
like the offer to do it on a time and materials basis for sure. Once you get into enforcement, it's
Yeah,
a whole different thing.
I don't want to get to enforcement until I know how much volunteer we can manage. But I don't know whether we can offer that or not, so that's kind of my open question.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of it. I don't see that we get a lot of takers that would take, but the fear for staff, of course, is that now we're wood chipping throughout Kirkwood. Even if it's paid for, we only have a certain amount of staff time. But I don't see this being a rush at the door either, so. Certainly,
Okay.
we'll take a look at it. If we do see that situation, we can certainly contact the owners.
Great.
So just for clarification, you're only doing it this year in September, or are you going to continue to do it until the first snow flies?
In October as well. We hope to do this whenever there's a need, Nancy. That's one of the benefits of having the wood chipper originally, is just being able to do this service and not, I mean, there's been piles out there since April.
Right.
It'd be nice to clean it up. I'm sure everybody's seen the piles out there. It's nice to get it cleaned up as we see it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yesterday was the Kirkwood KVFD 10K, 5K. I think we had a reasonable attendance, and I'd like to compliment KCA and Cheryl Stern on what appeared to be a very well-attended and successful chili cook-off. And really appreciate all your work. It was, and if you didn't know, that's a benefit to the fire department. So it works out really well that it's right there, held in close proximity and right after our event. So I think it flows really nicely, and hopefully we'll be able to continue that event 2 years to come. So I thought it was well attended, and so congratulations. Timber Creek Townhomes Grading has begun. Developers are now applying for building permits. So that's a modular building, and the building permit process will take a little bit because they have to approve the fire sprinklers and the connections and things like that. But they are hoping to be occupied this winter. Other things in your packet are CalPERS open enrollment begins on September 15th. It lasts through October 10th. For changes in your policy, now's the time to do it. Solid day of hydro cleaning and televising on the wastewater collection system. The board approved a maintenance program to continue on that. We did our first day. Results are in your packet. We're planning on doing a second day of that, and then doing a more extensive test during the infiltration season when we can actually see it leaking. The district Silverado truck is in need of a repair or replacement. I went to one board member and he said, put a bandage on it, and the other one said, get a new truck. So I decided to do absolutely nothing. We'll bring this to the operations committee and then as needed bring that to the board. In your packet as well, you'll find an EID power request. They're asking for power down at EID where we cross their property, and we have given them the standard response letter, which I think is in your packet. Alpine County Health yoga class has requested that we use this community facilities district as a location for a yoga class twice a week. This is through their health department. We're going to run their liability form through our general counsel, make sure that it's sufficient, and then we'll run this right back through operations and capital to get their input as well.
Are they gonna pay?
They pay Alpine County Health costs. So whether we need to charge them for the use of the room or not, it's a community service. I think in our bylaws we don't have to charge for community. If it's a for-profit, if it was Brandy's yoga service per se, that we'd have to charge for. Aquifer levels are holding at 127 feet. So we're very pleased. I think we will be presenting information at the next meeting on how our conservation efforts have held for this year as compared to last year, because we actually have that data. But I think that we're using less irrigation water than we have in previous years. So, thanks to the community.
Michael, I can't remember, do we have data on what the lowest level has been, other than when we intentionally pumped out a whole bunch last year to test the capacity issue? Do we have it, do you know, how low has it gotten?
I do actually have that data, and during a previous drought, and I'm thinking that it dropped to the 70s, 60s maybe, at one point. But I could get you that data.
Yeah, it's still a point of confusion for me about where that water comes from. The geology walk yesterday convinced me that it was coming from Caples, and as long as Caples has water, we'll have water. But it doesn't make sense that the level would drop under that circumstance.
Right now it isn't.
So now I'm confused.
And that concludes the manager's report.
Great. Unless there are any questions, we'll move to electric propane systems, managers' reports.
I'd like to start with the generator repairs at the powerhouse. Holt of California has completed their major warranty repairs on CATs 1, 2, and 3. Also, PowerSecure authorized Holt of California to complete the generator 7 replacement. So as you can see in this picture, what they had to do is pull out the whole fuel and coolant rack and then remove generator 7. So it was about a week's worth of work to get generator 7 out. That was completed on August 22nd, and we actually were able to start up the whole Volvo line on the 26th. During that operation, Volvo number 4 had an oil leak that was causing a fire hazard that had been down for a couple of months. PowerSecure also authorized the repair of that oil leak during this time. So at this time, we're still dealing with some additional coolant needs. We lost some coolant in the operation, but we do have all those operational at this time. We also had a Volvo technician come out, contracted by PowerSecure, to take a look at the warranty repair needs that Holta California found for us during their May inspection. He was able to confirm most of the warranty repairs were needed. There were a couple that he wasn't able to take a look at because the generators weren't operational during his visit. So we're working with PowerSecure at this time to get a plan together to get these final warranty repairs completed before the winter. It's at this point all oil, coolant, exhaust leaks, nothing that is keeping us from operating, but things that could get worse with time. On to generator emissions. We did get information from Great Basin that we are going to be issued a notice of violation for an hour on July 28th. What had happened is an operator turned on a generator but did not put it under load, and the stack temperature did not get up to 600 degrees fast enough to inject ammonia. So we reported this during our monthly report to Great Basin, and they've let us know they'll be issuing a notice of violation. And I've done additional training with all of the operators. We do have a little bit of a difference in staff. We have several people that are coming in to help out cover shifts. So we've gone through permit conditions and how to meet those with all of the currently operating Powerhouse staff. And we will come back to the board once we've received the notice of violation. In other Great Basin news, we are starting talks with Great Basin on what we're going to need to do when we're in standby. We've started talking to them about our requirements. Currently, we're required to calibrate all of our SIMS units every day. From my initial talks with John McNeil, he doesn't think that we'll have to do this once we're in standby. So we've sent them an email laying out what we hope our requirements will be, and we're hoping to have talks with them next week to see what they are going to be expecting us to do, both on a daily testing, but also on an annual basis once we're in standby. Additionally, for Powerhouse standby, we are looking at reductions in ammonia and diesel levels. We have only the one ammonia tank, so we will keep it in operation, but with a reduced capacity. For the diesel tanks, we have 2 of the 30,000 gallon tanks. Our plan is to look at reducing down to 1 of those tanks, keeping enough diesel and ammonia on hand for an extended emergency run, but not so much that we have issues with keeping the diesel so long that it is not usable.
We've actually gotten an offer or interest in the second diesel tank, which is pretty amazing because that takes quite an effort to move it. But Hutton Sons is actually interested in purchasing our second diesel tank, so we're looking at that.
And then on to distribution system maintenance. We have several tasks that we plan to get done before winter. These are mostly inspection items. We have a CPUC patrol inspection of both the electric system and the propane system that's required annually. So we will be getting those done before the snow flies. And we'll also be doing annual maintenance, which includes vacuuming out the risers of key propane valves and exercising those valves to make sure they're available in case of emergency. And that concludes my report unless there's any questions.
I have one, which is how would you characterize our relationship with Great Basin and and how happy they are with us? A being great, F being really bad. And I ask not only because I saw the notice of violation, but just also the general working relationship. And finally, I remember speaking with that fellow Dwayne Ono quite a while ago, where he sort of said, and I think he's been there a long time, he sort of said, hey, the condition of opening Kirkwood in 1972 was that the developer promised us an interconnection, and you've been running on diesel generation for 30 or 40 years. So where's their head with respect to us at this point?
I think our relationship with Great Basin, you know, if you remember, they came to our defense at during the initial operation of the powerhouse. I think it's been very good. John Becknell is their scientist, and we work directly with them. But the upper management, Dwayne Ono and Ted Shady, we've had a good relationship. They're thrilled with the Out Valley project. What we have to make sure is that that we're not open to also shutting down our existing generators, because they would love us to shut down every diesel generator ever, put a plug in the exhaust and, you know, never have to do it again. We're on the other side saying we need this for redundancy, but we don't want to have to test every day if it's not running.
So it's a good relationship.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments from the board or the audience?
When you say you're going to keep enough diesel for an extended time, what time are you looking at?
We'll be looking at our heaviest period, so December, January, I would say. For ammonia, we're thinking enough for about a 3-week run. It won't be that much for diesel, but multiple days so that we can get a delivery up here if needed.
The problem with diesel is it actually goes bad.
Administrative report? Thank you, Brandy.
This is the only slide we have for administration.
Thanks.
Hi.
My ears are a little hot. I will start with our performance reporting. This is actually still the same report from last month. We will finish up billing for August this coming week, so we'll have an updated report then. But our main concern right now is fixing the unmetered percentages and totals for all of our services. Right now we're looking at collection system repairs for wastewater, and the biggest thing we're doing right now for electric is looking at our step-up transformers at the powerhouse. We know they use a lot, and we're just trying to understand what's being used that we're not metering and what we can do to improve it. So at the next meeting's report, we're going to come back with goals that we want to see for each service, what's okay and what's not okay, and what we need to do to get there for all of these unmetered. If there's not any questions, I will go to financials. And I'll start with the balance sheet. The balance sheet shows that as of the end of July, our operating cash is at $2.5 million. And it's also showing that we are under budget by about $153,000. This is a timing issue on our balance sheet. There was a $350,000 payment that came from Mellow Roofs. But we make all of our payments out of our operating cash. So that money needs to be transferred to operating funds. If you take that into account, we're actually about $200,000 above plan. And the reason for that is that the budget assumes that we're going to fund the approved capital plan out of operating funds and transfer that money. And that money has not been transferred as of yet for multiple reasons. We're looking at capital projects to see what we actually need to do this year. So as soon as we figure that out, we will transfer the funds. Another note on the balance sheet is our accounts payable balance is quite a bit higher than planned by $4 million. This is our busy time for the Out Valley project, and that's basically what it is. And we're definitely looking at all the invoices now before we pay them, making sure more now than ever that we're meeting plan. And also in this accounts payable balance, we have our 10% retention for pretty much every project that we've done. We have it on our books, but we haven't paid it yet. Are there any questions on that?
I just have one question, and this has to do with the cash flow sheet and the balance sheet. Can you remind me, does where we have $2,493,637 total operating funds actual, does that tie to anything in the cash flow sheet?
Yes. Well,
The
I guess-
waterfalls, are
The waterfall is what
they're
the
different.
waterfall shows that we're 200,000 above plan.
so it's this timing issue then?
It's the timing
Okay.
issue. We, the balance sheet, as soon as we post an invoice, it takes the cash out, even if we don't actually pay
I
for
see.
that.
I
So
see.
we had a $350,000 Mellow Roofs payment. It's not actually operating cash.
Okay, thanks.
So the cash waterfalls, bank balances, and this is accounting.
Cash waterfall is actual bank balance. Income statement wise, July actually looked good. We met plan on every department except for propane. Operating revenues for July were up 30,000 from plan. And we were able to keep operating expenses under plan by 23,000. So our operating, we were able to keep it above plan by 7,000. It shows bottom line that we're above plan for July, 106,000. A lot of that is in our interest expense. We assumed that we were going to have more of the Rust funds drawn in July than we actually have. Water was above plan for revenues by 5,000, and operating expenses were down 7,000. So our net income for July, it's a net loss of 6,000, but above plan by 13. For wastewater, operating revenues were up 8,000. Operating expenses were down by about 7,000. So we're up from plan 15,000. For electricity, our operating revenues were up 12,000 from plan, and our operating expenses were also up a little bit from plan by $500. Not too bad.
We'll call that plan.
Yeah. And our only department for July that did not meet plan was propane. Operating revenues were down 3,000 from plan. Our operating expenses were down just about 1,000. So we're only below budget by 2,000. Are there any questions on that? For the operating cash waterfall, again, this is actual cash. And it's showing that as of July, our operating cash is 2.8 million, which is up 200,000 from plan, again, due to capital expenses. Something to note on here, we have a revised projection for the year, and our lowest month is showing December of 2014. As Standish mentioned at the Finance Committee meeting, it's going to be staff's goal to make sure that we get that to at least 2 million as is in our rate strategy goals.
So, Jill, so one question for you. I believe every account here is under budget on G&A allocations, and it's the first month and it's the budget. So is that going to continue, or what happened?
I sure hope so. We spent
Okay.
less in G&A than anticipated, so.
Okay.
But
Why would that be? Why, I mean, is there something that be driving that? I mean, and then if you compare this year versus last year?
There's a lot of things that go into it. Yes, we're, doing everything we can to keep operating expenses down. But also in the budget, we flatline it throughout the year. So we take our total projected expenses for the year and divide it by 12.
Oh, okay.
So there's some months that may be higher. In the winter months, we may be
Right.
spending more.
Well, the big change is payroll and related services is 6,000 savings, and then contract services is 6,000. And that kind of explains the majority of it. So I'm assuming these contract services just sort of uniform throughout the year?
Contract services are based on need.
Uh-huh.
If something breaks, you need a contract service that's,
Okay.
so it's a really unreliable area. There are certain contracts that we know about, but a lot of contract services is something like a VFD at the wastewater treatment
Yeah,
plant goes
okay.
down, and suddenly we have a large expense.
All right, so half of the savings is not necessarily, we don't know if it'll repeat or not, that depends on luck a little bit. And then the salaries and wages below plan, is that because we have an opening that we're not filling?
Right now, we're still spending time on capital projects, the Owl Valley project.
Okay, so that's what that's happening. Okay.
That's a very good point.
Caroline?
I'm curious if you look at, or my comment would be that we had 2 events in July, and usually we have one in July, one in August, one in September, and now we had the one in August instead of September, whether the occupancy is what's driving your increased revenues, possibly, or if you even look at that. Because to me, we had the biggest 4th of July, and I thought yesterday was one of the biggest I'd ever seen. Plus now we got the extra rec center open. So I don't know if you just adjust the budget for next year based on this year's budget, on what happened, or whether you would look at stuff like this or not. I'm just curious.
We try and look at all of that, but we don't necessarily budget per month.
Well, revenues you're predicting per month, right?
Yeah, I don't think we took into account the date of
Well, that's what I'm curious. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just pointing out that some years the fall's different, and I suspect that affects your revenues.
Yeah, just in looking at water, for example, the dominant revenue is the base charge, and the usage charge is nominal.
So then it wouldn't
in the
matter.
summer, so it may not matter very much. And this year's budget assumes that we're halfway between our really good year 2 years ago and last year, which was bad. So we're assuming we're somewhere not too bad, is what we're assuming this year.
Let's keep going.
A quick audit update. We had Moss Adams here last week, all week, to complete our audit. It was a first-year audit, so it had a few challenges tying into numbers from AKT, but they were great to work with. I'm happy with our decision. And Jennifer, she's our main auditor, will be back this coming Wednesday through Friday to finish up what we couldn't, and sit with me to write the financial statements to make sure that we're all on the same page on where we're at. There are a couple significant items that we're going to discuss with her when she gets here. We need to expense cost of issuance costs for the COP, which we've known for a couple of years. But there's an option to either go back to last year and do a restatement of the audit, which we're hoping not to do because then we have to deal with AKT, or just expense that all in this year. And another thing is on how we were expensing and capitalizing interest for the Russ loan. For Moss Adams, and they're saying per Russ, we're not doing it the right way. We were instructed by AKT to do it one way, and it's looking like that may not be the way it is. And it's possibly about a $250,000 expense that we'll have to expense to electric. But we have a meeting set up for when she gets out here to better understand that, and get Bob Benson from Russ involved to make sure that we're doing everything the right way. Staff has looked at a Form 7, and that's what we report our tier ratio with Russ. And worst case scenario, if we do have to expense both to this year, as of June, we will still meet our tier ratio for electric. And that's all I have.
Glad to hear it's going better.
Great.
And we'll have that audit by when? September 30th?
Yeah, they will have it for the October finance committee meeting.
Will they have the management letter?
Yes.
Okay. Great, thank you, Jill. Any questions for Jill? So committee reports, communications?
Well, I guess we'll have an exciting next year communicating all of the great new ideas. But otherwise, no, there's nothing new there.
Planning hasn't had a committee meeting since the last board meeting, so nothing really to comment on.
Finance?
On finance, I met with the auditing team last week to go through things, and I strongly encourage them. We have a very, very complicated set of businesses distributed over a very small number of staff and small number of users. So I asked them to spend a lot of time looking at ideas, anything that would allow us to operate more efficiently, identify areas where we could reduce risks of errors and things of that sort. So I encourage them to be as expansive as possible, and then we could prioritize which things we would do. So I'm expecting a long list of ideas from them that we can chip away at. So that's one area. And then the second we really want to dig into will be just how we reduce rates. Where are the opportunities and how can we do that? And to compare it against, prior predictions and see where we stand. And the first test of that will probably be the meeting, the rate hearing meeting that we'll have next month.
Operations capital?
We didn't meet since our last meeting.
Personnel, we met on Friday, and significant topics include revising the employee manual specifically for housing credits. And we also approved taking the next steps in employee assistance program. I think staffing for snow removal operations, now that we're probably going to be doing all residential units, is tight. And we need to do a good job, especially if we're applying to do, this 218 process. We talked about the opportunity to reduce costs and improve employee take-home compensation by eliminating the district's payment for Social Security in addition to CalPERS retirement benefits. I think that's pretty much it. Anything you'd add or subtract, Michael? Okay. And we're going to try and meet every 2 months as opposed to 3 or 4 times a year. Nancy?
I just have just a suggestion. You know me, I'm always full of ideas. As you're going back through that, what you're calling the personnel manual, you consider calling it the human resources manual, and consider, as you're looking at page by page, you look at the more current language that's being used, especially in California.
Okay. Is ours dated?
Yeah. Some of it makes me cringe,
Sorry?
Some of it makes me cringe, and so I think, well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Which brings us to 11, general discussion opportunity for board members to ask questions for clarification, provide information to staff, committee updates, request staff to report back on a matter, or direct staff to place a matter on subsequent agendas. Anybody have anything? Finish the electrical on budget on November 1st. Meeting adjourned?
Or do we keep it open until we do the site visit?
Yeah, I think it might
Oh, okay.
either way. You're under Brown Act during the tour either way.
Oh, okay.
The discussion should be.
We can look but not discuss it.
Discussion should